Thanks for coming along today. We are going to be dissecting for the next 3 hours. So you can't leave your kids here for the next 3 hours, mums and dads, but you can keep coming back or you can stay here as long as you want. So my name is Ben. I'm Professor of Evolutionary Biology and Science Engagement at the University of East Anglia, and I specialise in evolution, anatomy and chopping things up. Also got Dr Jess French here today, who is a vet and author and all-round amazing person, and Jess is going to be leading the dissection today. And we've got Catherine, Ellen and Charlie, who are all amazing at what they do and will be helping us through the process of a dissection today. Now, when you turn up here and you see this, the initial thought is, ugh, it's gross. There will be bits that will be gross today. It will look gross, it will smell gross, and there might be some gross sounds. However, the reason we do this isn't just because it's gross, it's because we learn from this. So looking at this animal today, we can understand welfare, we can understand behavior, we can understand what we call captive care, how they're kept in zoos and sanctuaries around the world. So this is an educational dissection. Also, it's really worth and very important to say that this animal has not been killed for today's project. This was a zoo animal from the UK. Sadly, it's a very old animal who became a little bit too old, a little bit arthritic, and the decision was made to euthanize her. She lived a very good, happy, healthy life, as we'll see inside. We can even tell what her life was like. So we're going to be going through a series of steps over the next few hours to look at different parts of this animal. Jess, do you want to say anything before we start?
No, I'm just super excited. I think you've covered everything. Can't wait to get started.
Does anyone, importantly, does anyone know what animal this is, first of all? A llama, yes. Do you know anything about llamas? No. All right then, good. You will
yet.
By the end of the next 3 hours. I'm going to ask you again. I want like an hour's response in an hour's time, all right? These llamas are originally from South America. They are a domesticated breed or species now. They come from guanacos, which are the wild equivalent. These are in some ways the equivalent to goats and sheep that we have in other parts of the world. So these have been specially bred and selected in certain ways because they're a domestic animal. It's for their meat and their long hair as well.
And also they're animals, so they carry their... These things live high up in high altitudes at the top of mountains, and they get packed with loads of stuff on their back, and they're used sort of carrying, a bit like horses.
As you want. So really important, if you've got a question, stick your hand up and we will either come round or one of the team will come and ask you a question, and we want you to ask lots of things. There are no silly questions today. Even if it sounds really silly and you think, oh, that's a really stupid question. Stupid questions.
Love them. And sometimes we don't even know all the answers, do we? And we learn something new as well. So
yeah. If you do find any gross today, that's okay. You just go step outside for a little bit if you want and then come back when it's less gross, all right? First of all, well, does anyone know, are these animals carnivores, herbivores, omnivores? Yep. They're herbivores. So these are animals that eat plant material. They're not like us that are omnivores that eat a bit of both. They're not like wolves that eat just meat usually. So these are herbivorous animals, and it means they're prey species very often. And if you're a prey species and you can only see a very small amount or your eyesight's not very good, it might mean someone's going to come and sneak up on you and eat you. So lots of different prey species need eyes that are either very big or on the side of their heads. Now, luckily, all of your eyes are on the front of your heads. That means it gives you really good depth perception. So when if you all do a little experiment and put your finger out as far out as you can, and close one eye, and try and quickly touch that finger with your other hand. Nice and quickly. How easy is that? You're all looking quite silly right now. Now do it again with both eyes open. If you do it with both eyes open and try and touch your finger nice and quickly, you should be able to do it much more easily. It's because both of your eyes have a big overlap, and it gives you 3D vision or stereoscopic vision. Animals like this have an eye on either side, but they don't have a huge amount of overlap. So it means they couldn't touch their fingers if they had fingers like this, but it does mean they can see almost all the way around. So having big eyes and eyes on the side of the skull, which we can show you more later with some of the skulls we've got there, gives this animal every opportunity to spot a predator before it's too late.
The other really cool thing about llama eyes when you're looking inside them is that, a bit like sheep, goats, cows and horses, they have these special granules in their eyes because they all live in quite sunny places and they spend a lot of time out in the fields, in the pastures. So they have sort of like sunglasses on inside their eyes. They have these little granules which protect their delicate eye structures from the sun. And unfortunately, I don't think we're going to be able to see these in here because this eye is just, it's been frozen and then defrosted. But that's a really, really cool part of their anatomy. Okay, so the next thing we would do is look inside the llama's mouth. Now, as we said, it's a herbivore, so it spends most of its time, well, eating grass really, eating plant material that's pretty rough, pretty coarse. So we would expect them to have, what sort of teeth? Big, sharp teeth for chasing down prey, or what sort of teeth would we expect them to have, do you think? Yeah.
Blunt.
Blunt ones, yeah, blunt, yeah, and really, really good for chewing ones. So we've got these pretty tricky, actually, to see. Maybe we'll make later an incision there so you can see. Oh, as if by magic. So they have these teeth at the back that are really, really good for chewing, and they spend most of their time like this. Because the plants that they want to eat are quite woody a lot of the time, and it's quite difficult to get the nutrients out of. So they've got these big chewing teeth like this. Actually, an amazing thing about llama teeth is that they also have these incredible canine teeth. Now this is a girl, so they're not particularly big in this one, but in male llamas, they actually have huge canine teeth, which they use for fighting each other, and they have 2 of them on each side. So male llamas actually have 2 big fangs, which is a weird thing that you wouldn't expect for herbivores. And they also have these long incisors at the front, which they use for plucking up the grass from the ground. Now I'm just going to quickly inspect her oral cavity to see if there's anything out of the ordinary, because whilst we are doing this to teach you guys about animal anatomy, I am actually doing the post-mortem of this animal for the zoo at the same time, so I just need to make sure that everything's okay.
So what are you checking for in the mouth, Jess?
Well, sometimes they can get lesions, they can get ulcers. Some diseases present themselves in the mouth with ulcers or specific lesions, specific sort of wounds that you get in the mouth. Just checking there's no cuts or anything like that. Checking if all the teeth are there that should be there. Which, they look, I mean, quite often with older animals there are some teeth missing anyway, which wouldn't be something to worry about, but...
Now I know this bit looks like it takes a little bit of time, but because we're all scientists and you're all scientists here today, we have to do things in a process. So I know there is at least a few of you going, cut it open, Ben and Jess, cut it open! We have to do this in the right format, in the right steps. So if we just jumped in right now and just pulled the heart out with the guts, and it'd look cool, but we're not acting like real scientists then. So we have to go through a process every time.
Another thing to mention here is, we'll talk a little bit more in a minute about the family that llamas come from. They come from the camelid family, so they're closely related to camels. And something that's really interesting about all of this family is that they have this split lip at the front. So they have a really movable lip. They can move both of those sides independently. And you can see that really well there. The separate lip there. Okay, now everything looks fine in the oral cavity, so I'm just going to quickly have a look at the skin. Now, there's a patch of shaved hair here. That will just be where they gave her an injection, so that would have been shaved rather than being bald.
But actually, you mentioned being shaved. There is lots of really thick and long hair. I mean, when I walked in this morning, I was quite surprised how long some of this hair is. Why do these animals have long hair? It's not fashion. Yep.
Is it because they need it for cold and winters?
Yeah.
They live in mountains and other areas.
That's it. So the answer there was these are animals that live in cold environments, have very cold conditions, and by having this long, thick coat, it doesn't look cool. Doesn't look. It looks a bit scruffy. It's like me on a bad morning, but it actually helps keep them warm. It traps air in between there, and these animals live in high altitudes, very cold environments. So you've got really thick, woolly hair in some parts of the body, and really long, tousled hair in other parts as well. So these are cold, adapted animals. So again, Jess is just checking between the hooves now for any infections, any little cuts that might have caused sepsis or blood poisoning. any sort of injuries that might be there.
Their feet are really cool. They have, unlike a lot of hoofed animals, they don't have hooves. They're almost like fingertips. You can see they've got sort of the pad there. If you think about a dog's pad or something like that, that's a bit like the end of your finger there, or a dog's pad. It looks really, really similar to them. It's very different to sort of a cow or a sheep's foot, which has sort of hooves on the end. They have, and also just like a little fingernail on the end there. And that's something, again, that's unique to the camelid family that they live in. And they have 2 toes, which means they're part of the
Artiodactyla.
Artiodactyla. Do you want to tell us a bit about that while I just look at the skin on the back?
We have fingers and toes, and anyone here got hooves? Apart from Catherine. You shouldn't have hooves, we'll talk about that later. But certain animals like sheep and cows and a whole group of different animals have hooves. And as Jess said, some are even-toed and some are odd-toed. So we've got 2 toes on each foot here. This is an even-toed. And that's a group that include deer, sheep, the camelids, including the llamas. And there's also the odd-toed, things like the rhinos that are called perissodactyl. It's just a split within the big family of mammals that are all the herbivores. It doesn't really mean anything, not one's better than the other, but as scientists it helps us understand who's related to who, what their evolutionary backgrounds are, and sometimes it'll also help show us what sort of habitats they live in. So Jess has mentioned these big, almost like squashy pads here that you wouldn't really expect an animal to have that lives up in mountains on really rough environments. But if I show you my trainers, they're nice and squashy at the back because it gives a little bit of suspension, a little bit of support. And that's exactly what you've got here. So you've got these fleshy pads with these hooves at the front, or these nails at the front. The combination means they're well supported, they've got good suspension, and they won't fall off a mountain. So,
Ben?
Jess?
It's time.
It's time, okay.
What is your tool of choice today?
So, first of all, a bit of a health and safety warning. Please do not use knives at home, kids, without mum and dad's or grannies and granddads' permissions. Knives are very sharp. Jess and I and the rest of them here are very well trained. We wear special gloves under our left hands. These are cut-proof gloves under here, so we are very, very careful with these knives that we have. But we will use a range of knives, scissors, and special blades called scalpels that are very, very sharp. And you'll see us changing them throughout the day because actually cutting through an animal can blunt a knife really quickly. And we all have our favourite knives. We are that geeky. Remember, being geeky or being nerdy is quite cool. We're geeks and nerds, quite cool-ish. We all have our favourite knives. So I like these big ones. You usually use smaller ones, don't you?
I do, but it's all right. It looks like I've got one of those today.
Okay, cool.
It's fine.
So the process that we start with, Jess and I will make an incision from up here somewhere and move down the body. And we look at the different organs, the different bits inside, the heart, the lungs, the liver, in a certain order so that we can go through and have a really good look at all of these different pieces and parts. I'm going to let you lead. What we might do, is it easier if we pull the leg back and attach it?
I think what I'm going to do, because it's got such a long neck and it's such a... well done. I'm going to cut this cheek back here so we can have a look at those teeth, and then I'm going to dissect down the neck so we can see the various components inside the neck as well.
Yep. So Jess, if you talk us through what you're doing.
Yep, so I'm just making an incision in the side of the mouth now, and that demonstrates really clearly those big cheek teeth there. And immediately, once that skin is reflected, you can start to see how it looks similar to the other skulls we've got here. Just going to do the same on the other side. And then I'm going to start to make an incision down the side of the neck as well, so we can see the structures in the back of the throat. So there are quite a lot of blood vessels under here, which is why I'm just doing it a little bit gently so that I try to avoid those.
If you have just joined us, welcome. I can hear a few people saying, what's happening, what's going on? This animal is not sick, we are way beyond that point. This is a llama that has very sadly died. It was euthanized, it was put to sleep by a zoo in the local area. This animal has not been killed for this event today. However, Dr Jess French and myself here, we are doing an autopsy or post-mortem to look at why the animal died, it's a llama, and also to educate you. Every time we do this, we learn a little bit more about the animal in question, and it helps go towards understanding these animals, help with captive care in zoos and sanctuaries as well.
Tell you what, I think we're going to get through a lot of blades today. This skin and this fur is super thick.
Ben, you can come right in if you want. Yeah, come right in if you want.
Okay, so we're starting to see some of the structures in the neck now.
There are also screens at the back here, so if you really want to see what's going on, maybe we can turn a screen around. Is that possible? So the crowd can really see exactly what's going on. Do you want me to start at the abdominal end and work up?
I would just do, because we're going to do the pluck, so if you come up the neck.
Yep.
So you can start to see a structure here that's got big white rings. Does anybody have any idea what structure in the neck has big white rings? So we've got two tubes in our necks. Air goes down one of them and food goes down the other one. So one of them is really, really hard. It's got rings of cartilage that mean it stays open all the time. Which one do you think would need to stay open all the time? The one that gets the food or the one that gets the air that you breathe? The air, exactly. So that's what this is here that you can see. These rings of cartilage, that's the windpipe or the trachea. And you can see it's got thick bands of cartilage there because it's super, super important that every time you breathe in, you can get fresh air in. So we're just going to dissect that right out. I'm going to get the tongue from the bottom, and then what we're going to try and do is take the tongue and the tubes right out of the mouth, and that's called the pluck. When you take the tongue out with all the tubes that are attached down the throat. Ben's just helping me at the other end because this llama has a really long neck. So normally you don't have quite so far to travel when you're doing this.
Anyone got any questions as we're doing this? It's Catherine and Jess doing this, not me, I'm here. Anyone got any questions so far? There'll be lots of time if you've got any more questions, but remember, we want all your questions, your ideas, what you're thinking today. It's a great opportunity for you to see a very unusual animal. Animal, most of us know what it is, but we've never really seen inside it. And as Jess is saying, even the number of, the length of the neck makes things difficult and strange and slightly weird. And when we get inside, there'll be some weird and wonderful bits in there as well. But any questions you've got, please just let us know. And what I might do is I might just bring this forward a little bit, because there's not quite as many as I thought. Oh, we got a question, yes.
I was wondering if you could open the hoof up and like see inside like a funnel.
Oh, okay. Can we open the hoof up? I tell you what we'll do in a little while. I'll cut into one of the pads of the hoof so you can see inside the hoof. But you can't see much in there. It looks quite white. It's quite thick all the way through. It is just like cutting your trainer in half. It's just spongy material all the way through. A few of you have joked already that there's a splash zone and then been reassured by mum and dad there isn't a splash zone. There is a splash zone today. The closer you get, the more chance you get of being covered in stuff
and it's
today.
probably going to be much more juicy once we get into the...
Yeah, this swollen tummy means there's a lot of gas and a lot of energy here.
Yeah,
so when it comes out,
it's going to be a stinky bit, that bit.
It's only been dead about a week, but we've had it in our freezer at UEA, and it's been defrosting the last few days. So she's as fresh as she can be.
I can't get this tongue out. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, so she was euthanized. She was an old animal. She had arthritis, and a welfare call was made that she was euthanized on those grounds. Very often in zoos, we can look after their welfare and we can make sure medically they're okay and health-wise, but by living longer, you do get age-related disorders and issues. So the decision was made to put her to sleep. How old was she? I don't know exactly how old she was. I know mature, so you're talking about 10, 15, around that age. We'll be able to tell when we get in by looking at the bones as well, so you can see whether, like, when you're bought, so the question was how old was she? We don't know exactly how old she was. We know mature, we know if she's arthritic, you don't get... Well,
she was geriatric.
Yeah, so Jess already is saying it's geriatric. By looking at the condition of the bones, of the soft tissue, we'll be able to tell what age bracket she was in.
Ah, there we go. That was the cut I was looking for. Yes.
So when Jess and Catherine have removed the pluck, we can show you. We can put a lot of it at the front of the table here. And I think what's surprising for a lot of people is we don't do the dissection always in the animal. By definition, there's not a huge amount of space in there. So by putting it outside the animal, we can have a really good look and spread out a wee bit, which we'll do in a little while. Remember, keep the questions coming. If you've got any questions with skulls as well, we've got Charlie and Ellen over there who can look at different types of skulls. We've got herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, whole range of different skulls to play with. I say play with, but as a scientist, play with.
Okay, we're getting there now. This is coming out nicely now. Just trying to keep... Are we going to do any sounds for this one?
Can you make a sound?
Well, did we bring any pipes or anything?
We've got tubes, haven't we?
Yeah.
Okay, give it a go.
Then I'll try and do this intact.
Yep, just to reiterate for people who are arriving all the time, this animal sadly was euthanized. It was put to sleep. It was in a zoo and it was a very old animal. The animal has not been killed for the event today. Jess is a vet, I'm an evolutionary biologist, and we look at these animals to see why they died, see what we can learn from them, and Jess is actually doing the real post-mortem now that we can feed back into the zoo and tell them what the issues were, anything we can learn from that. So we love animals, all of us here absolutely love animals. However, by studying dead animals can help us keep live ones in better conditions. So again, this bit takes a little bit of time. Oh, we've got a question at the back.
What did the llama say when it was invited to the picnic?
That's fucking...
I'll pack the sandwich.
Sorry about my language there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we are still managing to cut through the base of the tongue and the trachea, the windpipe that Jess has shown you already. We can show you in much more detail in a little while when it's all out. And the reason Jess is keeping it all together in terms of the tissue here is because sometimes you can, with animals that make certain noises, we can actually hopefully see how they make these noises as well. We've been working with jaguars recently and snakes, so maybe we can see if this thing made a noise, how it made a noise as well.
Oh, I just can't get this bit out. It's so deeply attached. Do you want this bit, or do you mind if I cut through that?
Can I cut? I know where it
Go on
attaches
then.
that bit.
No, it's so thick, isn't it, the skin?
There we are.
Oh, well done, Ben. Okay, great. So, we should just be able to pull that connective tissue now.
All right.
You just got... massive.
Now, Jess is saying they've got really thick tissue, really thick muscle, really thick connective tissue around the neck here. By having that really, really thick connective tissue means they can have a really stable head. So when they're fighting or when they're eating, when they're just going about their daily business, the last thing you want is a long neck that's really wobbly and really loose and really useless. So you'll see lots of muscle, lots of really strong connective tissue in this area. Now, from my point of view, it's really cool because does anyone know how many vertebrae, how many bones you have in your neck between your collarbone and your skull? Any idea, anyone? Yeah.
How deep?
7, yes. Now, this animal has a much, much longer neck. Any idea how many vertebrae this animal has between its neck and its collarbones? 7. Oh, look at the little smirky and all happy. Yes.
Yes, please.
Oh, your mum knew. All right, mum's not going to tell you this one. Does anyone know how many vertebrae a giraffe has in its neck? No idea. I'll give you a clue. 7, yeah. Very often in nature we use the same blueprint again and again and again. So with minor tweaks and changes, you can almost predict what a lot of animals will have. So there are very few mammals, for example, that don't have 7 vertebrae in their neck. Jess has gotten down to another piece. What's going on?
Look how thick this is. That's crazy. I think let's reflect this skin back here.
Now is any, oh yeah.
So, what was done, like, to prepare them? Was she drained blood? Because there's not a lot of blood coming out, so I'm assuming that's all been drained first, or?
Brilliant. I was then going to ask, and I've got a little bit of blood on me. I was going to ask, is anyone surprised how little blood there is so far? Were you all expecting some sort of Texas Chainsaw Massacre by now?
Yeah, well, we were fingers crossed.
A, you're a morbid bunch, first of all, but B, there won't be a huge amount of blood coming out of this animal. Anyone know why? There's a couple of reasons why you won't be covered in blood today. Yes, the blood is flowing. What makes the blood flow around your body? The heart, yes. So first of all, the heart's not beating. Secondly, a lot of this blood will be starting to congeal, so it's starting to go thick. So if your blood's doing that in your body, it's bad news. But as soon as the animal's dead, it starts to coagulate, it starts to thicken up. So there shouldn't be a huge amount of blood coming in. There will be some down in the abdominal cavity.
This chest is extraordinary. Look how sort of narrow it is. Wow, and all this is just muscle. I wasn't really expecting that. I thought it was going to be more barrel-shaped.
Now the nice thing is here, we're not putting
I've
any
never
of this on
done a llama
today.
before.
And I was going to say, the excitement that we get today is genuine because we've not done a lot of the animals that we end up dissecting. So even though, as I said before, we know what we're looking at, we know what we're looking for, we know all the different structures, every animal is slightly different. So it's still really exciting for us when recently we've done, what have we done recently? Jaguars, pythons, sunfish, llamas. Each one is slightly different each time. Do you want me to come in and have a go as well if you need to?
Yeah, please. I think if we make an incision right down here now as well. I think we're going to need some new blades. These are...
Where do you want me to go?
Do you want to continue reflecting back here and I'll move further down?
Sorry. So you want me to start? Which
Pardon?
bit? Which bit do you want me to do?
Well, I guess it's quite reflected back already, isn't it? But I was just going to say sort of around the rib cage.
Sorry, can I ask a question? So you were surprised about the shape of the rib cage.
Yeah.
How would that compare to something like a deer of a similar size but of a different type of animal?
Deer's quite broad.
Yeah.
It's still
Deer's
narrow
still
compared
quite-
to
yeah.
ours.
Right,
Yeah.
I was thinking of something else that's similar size but of a different family.
But actually, if you think about dogs, for example, there's massive variation. If you think about something like a greyhound, theirs is very much like this. And then if you think about something like, I don't know, like a Labrador even, it's much more round, yeah. So even within a species, I mean, dogs are obviously an extreme example because we've selectively bred them the way that we have, but this, in general, I mean, it is quite similar to a greyhound, to be honest, but no, because that's a bony structure. Wouldn't be the first time. That's a bony structure. So then, certainly this is quite distended, I think because it's full of gas and some liquid maybe. But yeah, bony structures don't really change after death. Ben has no sense of smell, ever, not because of COVID, so he's very lucky.
I lost my sense of smell when I was a kid, which I was devastated until I started dissecting. I was like, this is great. It's like my X-Men power. Oh yeah, another question? Oh, there are so many.
We've done so many cool
Do you know,
things.
I would be a real nerd and say I've never dissected an animal that wasn't interesting.
Yeah, no, that is
First
true,
of all,
actually.
that's my official answer as an
Even
academic.
if it's an animal that you've done loads of times, you
Yeah.
find something different every time.
But I've dissected sperm whales using diggers, like JCBs, to pull them apart, and actually using chainsaws. That was interesting. I've dissected chimpanzees, people, right through to very small animals. So I did my master's, one of my degrees at London Zoo. We even dissected the bees that died because they were rare bees. And if they had a fungus or they had some sort of parasite, we would do a whole dissection that would take 2 or 3 hours under microscopes. And when you turn up and you've got a whole team and there's a bee under a microscope, you're like, is someone joking? But they're just as important for conservation as something like a llama or a much bigger animal as well.
Look how fat she is. She was well fed.
It's not a scientific question, but can you eat things that have died of natural causes if it's still quite healthy?
Yeah? I mean,
I don't know if this does.
the question is, can you eat things that have died quite naturally without any sort of risk to yourself? Yeah, completely, and we do all around the world, and we have done for generations. And one of my granddads, I'm not going to say the word poacher, but he used to find stuff loads.
I guess the question always is, how do you know what it died of? If you're
Yeah.
just finding it, then it can be tricky to know, but yeah.
Whereas we know she was euthanized, and
Yeah.
the chemicals used to euthanize her would be toxic to us.
Yeah.
So we definitely
Yeah,
wouldn't eat her. But and again, I kind of learned this doing my degree, that even if you see an animal hit by a car, well, the cause of death was being hit by a car, it must be healthy. What caused it to run into the road to be hit by a car? Was there a neurological disorder? Was it full of parasites? Was it... You just take it home and stick it in the...
That is fat.
We can pass this round if you want.
What?
Yeah, have a poke, have a look. We do have hand sanitizer. It's entirely up to you today. If you want to touch stuff and prod stuff. We're going to try and pass stuff around, let you have a look.
Do they need to put gloves on?
Yeah, it'll be all right. As long as you use hand sanitizer afterwards, we'll put some out for you. It's all on you today.
Pardon? Well, I don't know. Yeah, I was just thinking this. I mean, they do live in really cold places, so this fat would be really useful to keep them warm. As I've never dissected a llama before, I don't know what the normal amount of, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, you're going to keep pulling that back.
Certainly in something like a sheep or a cow, that would be a lot. Look at it, it's such a thick layer all the way. I wonder if that's normal for llamas, or... Can you smell? I'm opening the abdomen. You can start to get that smell now, can't you? Wow, look, can you see that structure in there full of gas? I'm going to really try hard not to cut into that, but you'll know if I do. That's why I thought she was still frozen. It was the fat. sorry?
Like, how long is the frost?
How long did she take to defrost? I don't know.
I'm just thinking, like, your Christmas turkey takes ages. That's tiny, isn't it? Like,
You're getting ideas.
5 days. 5 days. We have got it wrong before, haven't we, Ben?
Yes. That'll take a day or 5. Right, so that's...
We had we once did a creature that had sort of insulation to keep it warm, and we'd kind of not factored that into our equations. I don't know if we're allowed to say that we did that, but what animal it was, but yeah, each animal takes a different amount of time depending on sort of how much fat it's got, how much insulation. Yeah.
Perfect.
Luckily, we have an absolutely stellar team of amazing assistants, technicians that are very good at working these things out. I think I might, what do you think? I might just cut through this muscle and reflect the whole thing down. Is that all right?
Yeah, we'll have a salad. Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, another question, yeah. Where's the what? Where's the heart? It's
going to be inside.
Yeah. Jess is pointing the heart will be in there somewhere. So again, we'll try and go through.
What I'm going to try and do is get all of this open so you can see everything inside, and then we'll go through it all bit by bit.
Do you want to come around here, you two, in a minute and start cutting around this bit?
Just trying to get through all this
where
fat.
the ribs attach up here. I don't want to cut through them if we can. I'd like to go around the top. So what you're looking for is
There was an interesting question.
Yeah.
right up here somewhere. You just chase the ribs up and see where they
Well, I
attach.
don't know if it's a normal amount of fat for a llama because I've never dissected a llama before. Certainly, generally we
Just finding
don't.
your
I
way
mean,
through.
sometimes
ribs, keep going,
in my
keep going, keep
surgery,
going.
when I'm
there
treating
somewhere.
dogs,
See
some
what you
dogs
can
can
do.
be really, really fat, and you might
if it
see
doesn't work,
a thick. But even in
then
a
we'll
dog,
just
you wouldn't
cut
see.
through.
You would hope
maybe
not to
one of
see
you goes
that
up
much,
there and
but
finds that, and the
they
other
do
one
live in
just
cold
tries to take some of
climates,
this
so it
off.
might be that the llama has
Just
got
pull
more
that
fat
whole
for
line.
that reason, or it might just have been a fat llama. I don't know.
Yeah. Any more questions? Anyone hungry? It's natural. You do get some. I mean, I get really. I'm a vegetarian. I get really hungry doing these. It is really weird. Jess, do you?
Well, I used to at uni, but apparently some of the chemicals that they use to in the I don't know, something in the dissections actually did have a physiological effect of making you hungry. But right now, I am not feeling very hungry or finding anything about this appetizing. Do you want to reflect that bit, that top bit back? And around the rib cage here.
Oh, I don't want no big knives. That's all right. Remember, any questions, just shout them out. Feel like we're family now. We've known you guys for a while. We've been through some weird stuff together already.
Can you
Ask
smell it?
away.
How long are the guts? Well, we'll probably get them out and stretch them out and see how long they are.
But what do you reckon? So do you reckon they're going to be as long as a giraffe's? Now, if I had a dog, if I had a carnivore and a herbivore, who would have the longer guts, do you reckon? The carnivore. Why? Okay, there's some right bits there, some bits that are right there. However, when you eat plant material, not as a vegetarian, but as most animals that end up eating lots of heavy plant material, There's lots of fibre, there's lots of silica, there's lots of hard stuff to digest. Now, eating meat is relatively easy to digest. If you had a dog's intestinal tract, for example, it might just be from you to me. If you had a sheep that was the same size, it would be you to me, to you, to me, to you, to me. Which is much, much longer, because it takes longer. They have a longer digestive system. So you either have a massive stomach, like a gorilla, which is why most gorillas you see on TV are just fat. It's not because they're lazy, they just need a massive gut. And things like the big dinosaurs, so the big things like Diplodocus, and the big titanosaurs had huge stomachs to digest. It's because they've got that really hard to digest material, whereas carnivores have a much shorter tract. Some like us, which are omnivores, somewhere in between the two.
What is the rib plan?
These guys are going to try and go to the top and see if we can take the ribs.
Okay, I think we're ready for that. I think we're ready for that now.
Yeah?
I might just cut this whole bit of skin off. What do you think? Do you reckon?
I couldn't hear what you said, sorry.
Cut the whole bit of skin off?
Yeah. I'm just going to come to here. Yeah.
How much does the bone density change with age?
Oh, good question. From an expert there by the sounds of it. How much does bone density change? In many mammals, we'll see a change across their lifetimes, and we will see a decrease in bone density, which we talk
Especially females.
Especially females, things like osteoporosis, osteopenia. We see the same things in wild and domestic mammals as well. Not always the same for reptiles. It can be the opposite in reptiles sometimes. Yeah, we would expect to see a decreased bone density in an old female mammal like this. Nice to meet you. No worries. Thanks. The comments there, and I think it's important to address these, not everyone's going to be happy with what we're doing, and that's absolutely fine. And the questions that we got then were, are we being desensitized? I would question, if anyone leaves here today liking animals less, then we've not done our job properly. And it's important to say that and to cover that. However, I think what we're doing, and what I hope we achieve today, is showing you the process, not just the anatomy of a llama, which is really important, but more than that, we're talking about evolutionary processes, we're talking about the processes of scientists, we're looking at how we investigate things, and it all goes together. So yes, you could look at this and say, it's quite sad. It is sad. I like doing this because it's part of my work and my job, but I don't like the fact this animal's dead. I really don't. None of us do. However, it teaches us and helps us educate both ourselves, it helps the zoo world, and whether you like zoos or not, that's a whole different story, but regardless, it is helping us understand that a bit more, and it helps us, as we've said, to really engage with that scientific process. How do scientists work? That's the reason we've gone from the head down to the tail in a right format. Rather than just jump in and do the bits we want to now, we have to do things in a set way, and you can extrapolate that or roll it out as scientists. This works for vaccines, it works for a whole range of different things. We all go through a process each time as scientists, as academics, and it's important, and I think great that you can be involved in that today.
And in terms of...
When I was a kid, you went to the butcher's, and the butcher had animals hanging up, and you watched the butcher take the cut that you wanted. And I think so many people got away from where their food comes from. You know, they see it in a little polystyrene packet. I think we're overly protective, maybe, rather than...
Absolutely. I would completely disagree with what that gentleman said, that this is actually helping sensitize you. It is an animal. You can smell it. She was alive.
You know, we used to go there and go to the butcher's, you'd have half a pig hanging up.
Yeah, completely.
And you knew exactly what a liver was and where it was.
Absolutely.
The other thing is, in terms of being a vet, it's so important to see lots and lots and lots of normal animals, so that you know when something is not normal. Because if you're seeing something for the first time and you haven't seen hundreds of other bodies previous to that, then you don't know if what you're seeing is normal for the species, is normal for that individual, or it's much easier to see what's wrong when you know what's right and what's normal. And if we weren't doing this, she would just be thrown away and nobody would learn anything. So the fact that we're doing this doesn't change the fact that she died. She died anyway, and this just means that lots of people get to learn from that.
Would they have buried it, or would they have fed it to the other animals?
No, probably cremated normally, yeah.
Another question.
What's the closest animal insides that you've dissected to this?
The closest to this for me is probably deer. For me, I've not done because these are, as we were saying earlier, these are part of the camelid group. So giraffes and camels and vicunas and all that. I've never done any of those. So there'll be lots of similarities, but I'm really interested when we get inside to look at the stomach in particular, because I don't quite understand how this stomach works, and Jess is going to explain to me beautifully. I hope.
For me, probably it is quite similar to a cow. Yeah, I haven't done a camel either, or a llama before, but certainly seeing so much guts when you open is very much like a ruminant, so like a sheep or a cow. All right, Ben, let's just discuss these ribs, because I know you want me to do it in a certain way, but I'm not sure where you want. Do you want to come around here and have a look?
Do we have any luck with the ribs coming off?
That's what we're talking about.
Oh, that's what we're doing now,
Yeah.
is it? So what we're trying to do at the same time is, this is a great opportunity for us to use it as an educational tool afterwards, so we don't really want to mess the skeleton up too much. We can use these for teaching materials, we'll clean them down, we'll prep them and use the bones for teaching as well. So she will be used for teaching for years to come from this. So we're trying to, rather than use the bolt cutters that we do have that would be very easy to go through the bones, the ribs especially, we're trying to cut right at the top where they join the spinal column to cut through there. So we're...
So, well, I don't really know what you...
Right, let me have a quick look. Where is she?
But we're going to need to go into the... What I don't understand is how we're going to open the ribs without cutting them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, they're going to be right up there, aren't they?
What are you trying to do?
Let's see if I can... And I think, for purpose of today then, we just cut through mid-rib.
Yeah, do you want to get on with that and I'll just
that
talk
right?
about this? So
Yeah.
this is what I dissected from, so the tongue, where's the tongue gone?
The muscle between each rib.
So this
You
is
might
what I
just be putting your
dissected
thumb
from
in,
the back of the
and then
of the
this
throat.
It's quite gross, but...
The tongue was attached on there, but I had to cut it to pull
you
through
signed up for this?
the jaw. And then at the back of the mouth, you've got these two openings. So one of them
Big.
goes down
How little?
into the cartilaginous rings of the windpipe. So one of those holes,
Big.
that one, is the windpipe.
Yeah.
And then this one, so the bottom one there, is where when it breathes, that's what that tube is open. And these cartilaginous rings hold that tube open all the way down into the chest, and then that would go onto the lungs. So there's a continuous open hole from the lungs to the mouth. Obviously, when you're eating or something like that, it's covered up. I think I've cut the epiglottis. Oh no, it's still there. So there's the flap there. That flap there is what shuts it when you're eating so that you don't choke. It's a bit tricky to see. Can you see that there? So that flaps across to shut that hole. And then on the top, yeah, so that would be like that. Can you see? It's really tricky to see, but in there it flaps shut to close that hole when you're eating. And then that's how it would be open. I don't know if you can see that, but... And then on top of that is the other tube. So what's the other tube that goes down your throat? Do you remember we talked about before? One is for wind and one is for food. Yeah, so this one here doesn't need to be open all the time. It only needs to be open when you're eating and something's going down the tube into your stomach. So this one's just a floppy tube. It doesn't have any hard rings. And at the moment, it just looks pretty flat because, well, there's nothing going down it. But you can see as I put my fingers down, that would be what the food would be like. A bolus of food would travel down there, and then that tube goes all the way through the thorax and down into the stomach. And also in here, there, that's the voice box. So llamas actually make quite a lot of different noises. They can make gurgles, they can make, what were all the different noises we heard them making? There was like screams, there was...
What's the name of the...
The ogling.
Ogling. Ogling, yeah, ogling's a weird
all
sound.
kinds of different sounds. So they actually have quite a versatile voice box, considering, well, they're not an animal that you would expect to use lots of communication in that way, but we might try and recreate some sounds later.
Yeah.
We'll see how we get on.
I do that because I usually end up with a tube in my mouth blowing down a trachea, so that's why I'm making that face.
I'm just wondering how I can better show it, because I actually really love the anatomy in the back of the throat, because it's really quite complicated to be able to carry both air and food down into the body without choking you or suffocating you.
Yeah.
It's really hard to show that anatomy in there. How are we getting on with the ribs?
All right, so Catherine's going to come through now and do some chopping. So if we go mid-rib, we can...
So we're going to go into the rib cage now. The rib cage is there to protect the vital organs inside, which are, can anyone guess, or does anyone know what organs we're going to find inside the rib cage? The heart, yeah, amazing. And what else would we find inside the rib cage?
If we can try and do it in one line.
Lungs, perfect, yeah.
Might be come this way if not, because they're slightly angled down, aren't they? Yeah, if you come from this side and come next to Ellen, but that way, because the ribs cup slightly. Anyone ever broken a rib? It does make that sound. I thought we'd have at least 2 fainters by now, so well done, gang. There's still time. I have seen one person faint once at one of these things. Not at these, but in a lab.
Are we going to take both sides off, or just?
No, I'm just going to try and, if we can, just open the whole thing up front. I don't want to cut both rib sides, if that's all right.
What's really interesting, I think, at this stage is you can see how small the thorax and the organs within there are compared to the abdominal contents. Now, these are particularly distended at the moment because they're really full of gas, which is, they probably wouldn't normally be, but it's something that's happened after the animal has died. But still, quite a remarkable difference between the small chest cavity and the enormous abdominal one. The heaviness. Yeah. Certainly, yeah, and the muscles of the abdomen certainly are really, really strong to hold all of those organs in. And that's something that's normal in these sort of large abdomened animals, but the fat is not something that I normally see so much of. Because that would just make it heavier. Oh, yeah. So the organs inside the ribcage are really, really well protected because they're really important and they're inside this ribcage. And what we're trying to do now is get into that protective case and see what's inside. But Ben's trying to do it as neatly as possible because we want to use the skeleton afterwards for education. So we prefer it not to be, we prefer not to have a jigsaw at the end to have to put it back together. Pardon?
If I give you that, can you do that restaurant there, please?
So that, I think, is that the... Oh, no, that's not. I'd like to... Oh, no, we have already... So this is the diaphragm here that we're going through. What... What, you don't want me to cut through it?
Unless you want to go through and talk about it.
Well, it's already been perforated, so... I would like to show how high up the abdominal...
Okay.
No, it's too tricky, isn't it?
Yeah. I kind of need you to cut right
there.
Yeah, please. And just along here if I can. There we are.
Okay.
Hope says, last year I was sent one of the gastroliths from the crop.
Yeah.
Do llamas also tend to have stones like that?
No, if there were stones inside this llama's stomach, then I would be worried that there was something wrong.
Their stomach's quite similar to camels.
To camels, they would be really similar to camels, yeah, but I've never dissected a camel, so.
Don't camels like spew up their
Yeah, these guys do that as well. Yeah. So, pardon? Yeah, so they can spit up their stomach contents as sort of a defensive thing, like stay away from me. There's some of my stomach contents, which I think would make me step back also. Yeah.
So video of the camel that was it looked like his stomach had come out of his mouth, but I don't know if it was just...
Oh, I see what you. Oh, I know what you mean. Yeah, no, they don't. Oh, no, they don't do that. It's more the contents rather than.
To help. So what we're trying to do is pull the whole pluck out. And if I pull this apart, would you mind cutting through this bit?
Yeah, because I didn't believe it was a stomach.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure I know what you mean. I think I need to see the video. Yeah.
Oh, that's it. Yeah. So are we happy to go up here, Jess, and pull the whole pluck out? Now we've got that one side open.
Sorry?
Are you happy that we go and try and take as much out of the whole organs out? Can we do that?
Yeah, as long as that's the, yeah.
Yeah.
What, and just pull it all out of the body? Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I think I'll need several of us to do that though. Do you need to cut it back more? I think this side probably needs some more. It's at the back here.
Is it
If
easy
you lift that up, I'll do some.
So you guys are being really patient today, and we really do appreciate this, but what we're trying to do is take the organ, as Jess said, take the organs out and stick them on the table in front of you so that you can see, partly so we can save the skeleton, but also partly so we can have a really good view of what's going on in there.
What is that? Can you lift that whole bit? Ah, yeah, if you lift that up, perfect. Can you
Sure,
put your
you
hand
want
where
to give
my
me
hand is, please?
If you can...
Could you, yeah, put your hand in there. Perfect, thank you. Yes. That's it, and somebody grab that bit there, please. I need it, though.
Under where my fingers are down here, I can feel it's attached. So do you want me to hold that and you get your hands under?
That's it. I think it should be. Keep pulling. Pull. Pull. Yeah, perfect. Pull. That's it.
part of the reason we're doing this today also is to show you just how different scientists can be. When you think of a scientist, I bet you don't picture us five, do you? This is science as well, kids. I'm desperately trying not to put this over my shoulder, but...
Do you think...
If you're just joining us now, welcome! If you've been here all the while, what's wrong with you?
Oh, hang on, gas is leaking. Stop pushing.
Do you want cable ties for anything?
Yeah.
Well, I can't see where the hole is. Can we just try and take the pluck and leave the guts?
Yeah.
So just lean them back that way a second for me, please. Yeah, because if we just...
Do it in separate
yeah.
systems.
So if we put a cable tie over there,
Okay.
a couple of cable ties, please.
Have you got a hole, a way all the way behind? Yeah.
Oh, what, sorry?
Have you got the... If you cut through a way behind, so we can get all the way... Yeah, I've got it.
I didn't know when you said that.
I meant, is there a way that you can stick a cable tie all the way around?
All we need to...
Is
Yeah,
it
there's
there?
only one tube that we need. What's that? Oh, that's just a blood vessel, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry, could I just have a
Yep.
look?
Where's your knife?
Oh.
Right, I've got it.
I think I'd rather just do the whole lot in case.
Yeah, that's fine.
Could you just cut through
Can I what?
that diaphragm there, please? Oh no, it's not. Yeah, could you just cut through that diaphragm, please?
Yep.
Just straight across there.
All the way across?
Yeah, it's just muscle. And again. And there. So what we're doing here is, from experience, we know that if we cut through this tube here, gut contents spill everywhere. So we would prefer for that not to happen. So we're just going to seal it off. So then we can lift out what's called the pluck, which is the respiratory organs, without showering everyone in stomach juice.
Did you not trust us then? Someone just walked off.
I might double.
Yeah. Yeah, we have learned from experience how much to put.
And this is so distended, I think it's going to be a bit stinky. So, okay.
Tsunami-like.
Would someone like to cut through there?
Charlie, do you want to, or Catherine, do you want to cut through?
In between the cable ties. Yeah, that's it. Woohoo! So this is what is called the pluck. So this, if you remember, was the back of the throat with the tongue attached there. So we're coming all the way from the mouth, through the trachea, the air goes through there, down this windpipe, and into the lungs, that's right. So in here, which is also really fatty, we have got, oh, that's all around the heart, that fat. So these here, these are the lungs. And llamas have quite big lungs because they live at altitude, and so there's not a lot of oxygen in the air that they breathe. So they look a little bit like we've punctured them. Sometimes you can blow them up by blowing. Do you want to try that? Should we try inflating them?
Yeah.
Okay. So obviously, breathing is air going down this tube and into these lungs. So what we're going to try and do now is replicate what it's like to breathe. So we're going to breathe down the trachea and see if the lungs inflate.
Why did you got?
These are quite interesting shaped lungs, actually.
Thank you.
I think they're going to be quite big if we can inflate them. Catherine, you're the expert at the... I'm just going to get a new glove.
Do we put this, do you want me to stick this down the trachea and then cable tie around?
Yes, I think so.
Oh yeah, perfect. If you get that femoral head and just go under there and up towards Ellen, that'd be great, yeah. And then the whole leg should just drop back then. I've got to make sure I keep one end of the tube really clean. You'll see why.
Oh yeah, because remember we're going to do it from the other end as well. Actually, we could cut, after we've done this, we can immediately cut off and do the other end.
Oh yeah, okay, oh.
So make sure you keep one end
really clean.
Really clean.
Right, okay. Catherine then, would you mind? Just you wait.
This actually doesn't smell bad, yeah.
No amount of coats are going to help you in about 12 minutes time, kid.
I'd just go through that and like be really careful that you don't go through any of that, but that fat there you can just go through.
Esophagus, isn't it? Nope, wrong one.
So this is just blood that's come out of one of the vessels, and that's congealed blood. And that's why there's not blood everywhere, because it's clotted. Yeah, it does look like a snake, doesn't it? Quite amazing. So, and it's perfectly tube-shaped like that because it was inside a tube-shaped blood vessel.
If you feed that down where my finger is.
There's nothing surrounding that, but it's just blood.
That's not that, it's literally just blood, yeah. Yeah.
Ah, there we are.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think so. It's just, if you go through that, it will, yeah. So I would, you can probably just do it with your fingers, to be honest, because it just breaks.
I've just got to say, I'm loving the background music today as well.
Yeah.
It's really gentle,
spoiled,
it's really
aren't we?
lovely. Yeah, I think we should hire that person every time we do this. Right, that's all nice and clean, Jess. Do you want me to inflate?
Yeah, okay, so watch this bit here. Ben's going to breathe into the tube, that end, and hopefully it might be that we've made some cuts in the lungs so it won't work as well as it could, but let's give it a go. Did you not take your mouth off before you? I was going to ask you to do it again, but have you been put off?
I love educating kids. That was rank.
That was amazing, wasn't it?
No.
Oh, I wouldn't rub your mouth on there. Look at the state of your sleeve. Do you want to do it again? Yeah?
Become
So the llama's taking in a deep breath now. Amazing lungs. Wow, amazing lungs you too. Well done. Cool, really cool. One more for luck. Oh, can you see that?
Ah, that's why if the tubes come out.
Something's stinking.
Would you mind trying to... I'll hold it. Would you mind just trying to shove it down, please?
I love the shape of these lungs. They're really tubular.
Let's get even further. It's getting past that, isn't it? That's it. Can we tie that a little bit tighter? So what are the lungs made of, Jess? Why do they? How do they expand like that and contract?
So they're full of tiny, tiny, tiny little sacs of air. It's not just an empty hole in there. They're tiny, tiny, tiny little sacs which each has a really good blood supply. So the air in there, the oxygen in there can pass directly into the bloodstream. And just loads and loads of tiny, tiny little air sacs which all inflate at the same time when we breathe in.
It's like little heads of broccoli, aren't they?
Yeah. Looks just like that.
And we're talking about gaseous exchange. The gas has to transfer from the air you breathe into the oxygen that your body needs. And it's only at that really, as Jess said, that really small, fine level, like these tiny little heads of broccoli, like tiny, 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 tiny.
And so the tubes, they start quite big. I mean, obviously you're starting with this massive tube, and the tubes get gradually smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until they're absolutely tiny, like you can barely see them.
One more?
Yeah.
Does anyone want to blow into this for me?
No.
Weirdo. I don't actually think you're allowed. I'm just joking, sorry. I didn't think anyone would actually say. You're going to be an amazing scientist one day.
Fantastic. Okay, now what I would like to do is to cut this tube and to blow in the other end. So that's what happens when the llama breathes. The air goes in its mouth, down its long, long neck, and into its lungs. Now, to make sound, yeah, that'll be fine, I think. To make sound, the llama pushes air in the other direction. So it pushes air up with its lungs. The air comes out of its mouth, through its voice box, and that's what makes a noise. So we're going to see if we can get Ben to make a llama sound now by blowing in the other end of the trachea, the other end of the windpipe.
So if you cut through the trachea, if I let you and Catherine feed the tube in and attach with...
So that is what the tube looks like.
Oh!
It's huge, isn't it? And amazing how it's a bit like a vacuum cleaner tube. And that has to stay open the whole time so that the llama can constantly breathe. And the only bit of it that's covered, so it's an empty tube right down to the lungs. The only bit that's covered is right up in the top of the mouth so that you don't, none of your food or your spit or anything like that goes down there. Cool. Hang on, do you remember which end's which? Okay.
Because you're blowing down it, if not, Catherine.
Does anybody know what sound a llama makes? What kind of sound we're trying to imitate? I don't really know either, to be honest.
I was going to say, we don't really know, do we?
Oh.
But again, this is what we like about science. This is meant to be fun today, and yes, it's educational, but we're also learning as we go along. As we are learning about these different parts of the anatomy as well. Like we've all said, none of us have dissected a llama before. So a lot of it is learning as we're here as well, which is great fun.
And obviously part of the sound is made by the movement of the llama's mouth. So the position that its lips are in, whether its nostrils are open or closed, whether its mouth is open or closed. So as Ben has a slightly different shaped mouth to a... well, actually, it's nothing to do with that because you're just doing the lung bit, aren't you?
Yeah.
As we have no lips or anything attached to this, we're not going to have the same range of sounds that a llama can make. I really can't get that to stay on there. I've done that one too tight and then it's slipped through.
Do you want
But maybe just hold it. Could you hold that bit, please? So this, remember, is the llama's mouth. Where is the... So this is where the sound's going to come out of. So, well, let's have a go. See what sort of sound a llama might make.
Excuse you, Jess.
That is kind of camel-y, actually, if you think...
Okay, that takes a lot of puff first, but what you are seeing there, which is really nice, is the vibration. So all the noises that we make are vibrations in different ways. There's different parts of the body, different parts of the tongue, different parts of the throat. It's how you hold the body which determine how these vibrations are made. So we were doing a jaguar recently, and depending on where we position the head, really help with the pitch of the roar. So it's also, as Jess has said, the position of the body, the position of the lips, the position of the way they hold themselves, but it's fundamentally all down to this vibration. The only reason you can make these sounds that we make when we speak is because we're getting a series of vibrations in our throats. So you've got one more vibration thing from me.
I actually think I'm going to just cut some of that excess. Oh no, are you over this?
Go
are you
on
done? Maybe I can somehow... Actually, let's just cut it right above the larynx.
So with a jaguar that we dissected recently, Jess had to find one particular ligament that took an age to find, but when we found it, just moving that one ligament completely changed the tone, the sound, the pitch of that roar, didn't it?
That's
really
that
cool.
flap I was telling you about that protects. So this is the end of the windpipe here, the end of the trachea. Ugh.
We can probably go a little bit closer to the audience if you want, Jess.
Oh, yeah.
And that is all that stops food going down there. And then from there on, it's just an open tube into the lungs. It's cool,
Ready?
isn't it? Right, yeah, go.
Ah, that's sounding
It's
more
like
like
it- yeah.
what it should do.
That's like the grunting noise that they make.
You've got about two more.
All right, two more. Hang on, let me do one more thing. I can actually see the vocal folds there, but I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing with them because I don't know
It's your first
what
time as a
shape.
llama, it's all right.
Okay, leave it there.
That's how we and all other mammals that can vocalize make sounds. It's a range, thank you, it's a range of vocalizations, a round of vibrations coming from within the body past those soft flaps, those soft lips there that separate one part of the trachea from the other.
So do you remember I said there was loads of fat everywhere in this llama? Everything's been covered in loads of fat. So the heart is actually inside this mass here, and this is all just fat around the heart as well, which... Pardon?
No, it's not flowing. The question was, is it flowing? No. If that was flowing right now, you'd see the pumping first of all, but also there'd be a lot of blood coming out, and there isn't. Remember we said earlier, because the heart isn't pumping, and because the blood started to coagulate, congeal like this, the blood's not pumping around the body anymore. That's why you're not seeing loads of blood washing out. That's why you're not up to your tummy in blood right now.
So
and actually you can see
that was the
load
heart.
coming out.
Oh,
That's all the congealed blood, basically.
So the heart was all wrapped up in some fat, and now we are inside. This is called the pericardium. Right, we're just going to go through this membrane, and inside here, this might actually be juicy. Can you just pass me that tray, please? Right, we're going to cut through this membrane, and then the heart is inside there. Wow, look at the shape of it. Might just cut those lungs off so we've just got heart. We don't want to do anything else with the lungs, do we?
Well, about what?
I can cut the lungs off, can't I?
Yeah. We can show you inside the lungs after the heart and show you what those spongy structures look like, maybe.
Oh yeah, cool. And look, so there you can see the tubes when they first go in. I mean, they're much smaller, aren't they, than the tube going down the throat. But they're quite big, really, in comparison to how small they get. So there's part of a lung for you, Ben.
Thank you.
This fat that's everywhere makes it really hard to see. Like normally the individual organs are much easier to see sort of where the edges are, but because everything's covered in this fat, the edges are sort of blurred. What's that?
So as Jess has already said, the heart is one big muscle that just pumps all the time, and its only job in life is to keep on going. It has to beat in a certain rhythm to keep that blood pushing around the body. But as Jess will show you in a sec, when we get into the heart, there are different chambers or different sections of the heart that each do different things as well.
Right, there we have, oh no, there's still a bit of trachea attached there. I'm just going to cut that right off there. And there we have, more or less, just heart. So that is the size of the llama heart. And if you think that our heart is about your heart, all of you, is about the size of your fist. So, well, it's a bit bigger than a llama fist, but bigger than ours as well, probably twice the size of ours, I would say. But it's quite a big animal, and also its digestion takes lots of energy. So, and also it's living, as we said before, at high altitude. So it has quite a lot of. It has the big lungs, big heart. It actually has more red blood cells per sort of unit of blood than any other animal. It has the most red blood cells of any other animal, which makes it really, really good at gaseous exchange and extracting oxygen in low altitude conditions. Yeah.
How many chambers does it have?
So just like all mammals, it has 4. I'm going to get inside. I'm just trying to decide the best way, the best axis to cut this on. I think I'm going to cut it down here. So the first chamber that I'm cutting into is the left ventricle, which is the big pump. That is the chamber that sends the blood to the whole of the rest of the bodies. And you can see there, I mean, most of that is just wall. So that is all muscle, that is thick muscle. And actually, that size there, that's all the blood that's in the heart. But that hole there, there's actually not that much space inside for blood. Most of it is the thick muscular wall, and it needs to be really, really strong, especially in a big animal like this. You know, it's got a long neck, it's got a big body, it needs to have really muscular walls to pump that blood all the way around the body. And I can put my finger through here, so that is the chamber of the left ventricle, and it goes up through there into the big blood vessel that comes out of the heart and goes to the rest of the body, which is the aorta. So you can see that is there. The blood comes up out of the left ventricle into this blood vessel here, which is aorta. The aorta then goes off across to all parts of the body apart from the lungs.
Oh, very quickly, Jess. So do you know the different types of blood vessels we have in our bodies? There are, yep. Ah, not blood cells, blood vessels. Veins, arteries, yeah. So the aorta is and capillaries, yeah, perfect. So veins, capillaries, arteries. The aorta is the main artery in the body, and as Jess can show you there, it just has this lovely fibrous wall that won't collapse. So like we saw with the trachea, it doesn't ever collapse. We need to keep the arteries open, we need to keep them solid in terms of their walls, because you've got really high pressure blood being squeezed through all the time.
It's just holding itself open, that tube there. Oh. And so above the ventricle, we've got an atrium, and the atrium is basically just somewhere for the blood to collect. So when it comes back into the heart, it collects there before going down into the pumping chamber where it's pumped to the rest of the body. Now on the other side, we also have a ventricle and an atrium, but this side you can see the wall Oh, it's got loads of blood in there, look.
Oh, that is long.
And so that's the right ventricle wall. You can see it's much, much thinner. So that, in comparison to that, can you see? Much, much thinner muscular wall. And this is for the other, so mammals have two circuits in which blood goes around their body. They have the one that goes from the left ventricle through the aorta and takes oxygenated blood, blood that's got, you know, all the good stuff in it, to all of the organs of your body. The right ventricle is just pumping blood to the lungs. Now, why does the blood need to go to the lungs, and why does that need to be, what sort of blood goes to the lungs? Does it have lots of oxygen in it when it goes to the lungs? Yeah, exactly. It's deoxygenated blood. So that's blood before it's got all of that lovely... So the oxygen has come down the vacuum cleaner trachea into the lungs. There's been an oxygen exchange, and all of the deoxygenated blood that doesn't have to go very far and doesn't have to go at very high pressure is pushed by these not very muscular walls of the heart. The blood goes through the lungs and it receives lots of lovely, lovely oxygen. Then it comes back into the heart when it's full of its oxygen, into the left ventricle, and is pumped to the rest of the body. Ooh. And inside the heart, you can see, can you see any of them? There are some lovely valves. And also these fibres, can you see those there? Those are what transmit electrical signals to the heart. So the heart has electrical signals that tell it to beat. And those fibres there are what transport those electrical signals so that the muscle knows when to contract. Amazing. Well, what time are we on? Should we move on?
I've got the time, please. 2 o'clock, thank you.
We probably need to move on,
Loads
don't
of
we?
time.
Oh, do we?
Loads
Move
of time,
on.
yeah.
What did you want to say? You said when we've done that, we'll do inside the lungs. That's what you said.
I've cut some sections here for
Oh,
you.
did you? Should we just leave that then? Move on to the guts?
It's up to you. You can show them. You can show the audience if you want. I've cut it so you can see the bronchi,
Just
and then.
maybe you could carry. They could carry the. Because I don't want to put my.
So Ella's going to show you different parts of the pluck. So you've got the tongue at the start, but there's rough little lumps that all help with the movement of food and help with the breaking down of food. You've then got the trachea, that cartilage tube that Jess talked about, and I've cut it in half so you can see just how open it is. And then you've got two sections of lung, one from the outside and one that I've cut through so you can see the different levels of tubing. So it goes from the trachea down to the bronchi, you get into the bronchioles, and at the microscopic level, you'll have these little alveoli as well, those tiny little broccoli-like structures. So you can start to see it goes from here to here, down to here, and then eventually into the blood that Jess was showing you, or into the heart Jess was showing you. Oh, thank you. Do you want a clean knife yet?
Cool. Let's. Oh, the colon's wrapped up in there. Shall we? Oh.
Yeah.
Shall we put a
It's in the tub.
cable tie on the long here, and then lift
Can I
out
have some
the
cable ties, please? Thank you. Charlie.
And then we go through the digestive tract. Yeah?
Can I get you taken, I want this limb off and that limb off. It's your
Pardon?
job, you two, you and Ellen if you want, and come under the scapula. And
To
then
be honest,
through
at the moment
hair,
it all looks
and
pretty
that
much
whole
the
leg comes
same. It's
off,
congealed
please.
and it's all
And some of the
pretty
back
dark.
end.
We can't really tell the difference.
It's fresh, it's very sharp.
It's just dark because it's congealed, and that's just what normally happens all over the body after they die. Yeah.
Taking both limbs off, so going under this scapula, and the same with the femur as well. To try and
What is that?
limb off, that's right. Yeah, I think Catherine's replacing the blades
Why
as
is
well. But it might be scissors through the skin as well. Just a
that
combination
kidney?
of either work on the same leg or take the back leg if you want.
Should we try and lift this out?
Yeah.
It's really heavy.
It's still attached, isn't it?
Is it? To what?
Yeah.
That's fat, I think.
It's still attached to the fat.
Well, yeah. Everything's attached to the fat in this thing.
Sounds like me.
I'm scared I'm
Charlie,
going to
can
slip
you
off
cut
the
through here,
table. It's
please?
really slippery.
Just beneath my, so between that finger. Jess, watch your fingers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and towards Jess. Thank you.
What's that? It's just connective tissue, is it?
Taking it out.
Yeah. Oh, starting to smell. Probably that we want that at the. Oh. Probably the other way up, I think.
Yeah. So if you move this.
That's the spleen. Almost might just detach the spleen there.
Right.
I mean, I think we're going to have to cut into this, but it's not going to be pleasant. And as I've been doing this, I've been doing the real post-mortem to see if we've found anything wrong. And actually, everything we've found normal at the moment has been, apart from the fat, has been pretty normal. So that's great. It means the animal didn't have any diseases that we can. Oh, this is heavy. There's something in here.
And we'll sometimes see extra fat in older animals, in animals that are in zoos, because they're not running around as much, they're not being chased by predators, they're not using as much energy all the time, so actually they're not using their bodies in the same way they might in the wild, so we might see extra fat build-up. If they're on certain medicines, sometimes they can build up fat. There's a whole range, but it's not.
And also we know that she had arthritis.
Yeah.
So she probably, she wasn't keen to move very fast or very far because it was probably sore for her to move about too much. So it's really normal for animals to put on weight as they get older, and she was very old. So yeah, it wasn't an abnormal finding as far as that goes. Just makes our job a little bit more interesting. So everything's wrapped up. So this big organ here, this is the liver, but I think I'm just going to, I really want to talk about the digestive tract first. Well, it's part of the digestive tract, but I want to talk about the stomach first. So I'm just going to remove the liver, I think. Mm-hmm. And this big bit here, this is the stomach.
It'll be easier.
And that's what we're going to talk about next, if I can.
Sounds easy with scissors over.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Cool. Hang on, let me just. What would be great as well is if the two of you, or between each one, can you just cut as much?
I guess it could be. To be honest, I think it's more likely. It's more likely something that's happened after she's died, and it's probably bacteria in there that are producing the gas, and everything's starting to ferment a little bit in there. So it's less likely to be a gas that would normally be present there, but something that's happened after she's died.
And what Jess is saying there with the bacteria, we can see that as you decompose, as any animal decomposes, you do get bacteria that are normally in your body that will then kick off and do their own thing. And you can see that slightly green discoloration around some of the tissue up here that we could see earlier. That'll be a sign that some of that bacteria is starting to increase. So it's just a normal part of the decomposition process. If you saw that on a live animal, it'd be worrying. If you saw an animal that's been dead for 3, 4, 5 days, that's a completely normal part of that process. So also part of the job that we're doing today is knowing what's normal in an animal like this and knowing what's abnormal. So Jess is looking for those things, right, it's allowed to have a swollen stomach, that's not a sign of disease, that's just a normal process involved in when an animal dies. Any more questions, anyone? Yes, at the back.
Is it the gas that bacteria makes that makes it smell bad?
Yeah.
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 Without the bacteria, there would be no smell.
Um,
And also, if people wonder what kind of gases they might be. CO2?
there'll be CO2, there'll be nitrogen in there, there's a whole range. There will be, I mean, we said no methane. It's not methane like llama farts, which would be like lots of methane. But there will be methane in it. It's a combination of all these different things, but a lot of it is nitrogen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, a combination really. And also it's partly because the animal's dead, but also the material they're eating, so that really slow fermenting process, they're meant to be slowly decomposing, breaking down, within the digestive system anyway. So most herbivores, if the moment they're dead, if you cut them open and look inside, they just smell really quickly, more so than a dog or a cat or an animal that's purely carnivorous. Oh, another question?
Is there just compact air in that, in the big, like...
Yeah, so that's the gas that Jess was talking about that's as a byproduct of the decomposition. So the bacteria are doing their thing and breaking stuff down, and they're having a great time right now because nothing's stopping them doing their thing. It's like a bacteria party in there. And because of that, the gas getting given off is just expanding.
So how long do you know the large intestine in the llama will stretch?
We will, I tell you what, we are going to find out in about 8 minutes' time, I reckon. Yeah, we'll have a look. We'll have a good stretch out and see how long we go.
So I have now. So this whole thing here is the stomach, and it is a you can see it's got very distinct different areas. So, and they all perform a slightly different function. So can anybody think, or does anybody know of an animal that has, another type of animal that has a stomach made of very different parts, made of lots of different parts? Cows, yeah, so cows have 4 different, it's one big stomach, but it's almost like they have 4 stomachs because they all perform a slightly different function. They all look very different. So you can see here, we have, this is all stomach, but the different parts of it look really different, don't they? So there's this big sac here, which, the smooth bit, when food first comes down that esophagus, that tube, it goes through the thorax, through all the thoracic organs, past the heart, past the lungs. The tube comes straight into here, into this smooth portion. Now, as we said before, the food that llamas eat really doesn't have a lot of energy in it. It's things like grass, it's things like sort of woody shrubs and things like that are really, really difficult to digest. So it sort of ferments in there for a bit, which is, again, going to add to that smell, that fermenting that goes on in there. And then actually what they'll do is they'll, after it's been in there for a little while, they'll bring it back up again and chew it again. And they'll do that several times, a cycle of trying to get as much as possible out of the food. So that's the first section. Then it moves into this bit that looks like a bit like a brain. And I actually think I'm going to cut into this now. So hold your breath, guys, because this is going to be, all that gas is about to.
Just the top there, that we're just to keep some freedom. Just all top it up there and yeah, as much as you're happy to. Please.
So this is the first part. This is the sac where basically it's just, the food is just pummeled and it's chewed again and again and again until it sort of looks like this putty mush. And you can still see there's some sort of strands of whatever it was eating then. So it's eating right up until the time that it died. So that's the first section, and in that section the interior wall is very smooth because all that's happening there is it's getting broken down into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces. And then we move to this second section, which you could see really, really well when it was inflated. Now the inside of that looks totally different. It has lots of glands, and the glands secrete, that's sort of the chemical digestion. I probably don't need to go all the way into that. And then chemicals start to break it down. So gradually, as it gets through the different sections of the stomach, it gets more and more broken down.
Can we bag the inside of this, please? Do you want me to empty that stomach into here, Jess?
Yeah.
A good way to think about this stomach is to think about your home. Most of us don't have a home with just one room. We have different rooms in a house that serve different functions. And exactly the same thing. It's one stomach, it's like one house, but within there are different rooms that serve different purposes. You don't usually have breakfast in your bedroom, I assume. You usually have it in the kitchen, maybe. Or you don't have a bath in the living room, usually. So you've got different rooms that have different purposes. We see the same thing with a stomach like this. Ours is just one chamber. It's only doing one thing, whereas, as Jess has said, there's different roles for different parts. It's all because of this is really, really hard to break down.
And you can see by the time it's got to this third room, that material, which is quite hard and fibrous, has actually been turned into a sort of liquid. And by the time it gets to that third chamber, it's been broken down physically by chewing and by the muscles of the stomach, and then it's gone and been chemically broken down. And by now, it's actually more of a soup. Then it's much easier to digest when it's in this format. So that's why you have the different 3 segments.
And to do that is, I mean, that looks quite gross. We're all here going, that's all blah. But in terms of biologists and look at evolution, that's really amazing because it allows this different level of breaking down, of decomposition all the while, and it allows really good digestion of something that's really hard to break down. What have you found there?
I have no idea.
It looks
like a conker.
It looks like an avocado pip or a conker.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a good idea. What is that? I have absolutely no idea what that is. It's a pip of something, isn't it?
Yeah. It looks like a conker. Well, it's hard though in the middle. Conker.
Some sort of...
Yeah.
How weird. Been chowing down on some sort of seed or pip of something. Right, let's see what else we can find in here. We've found some weird stuff in animal stomachs, haven't we?
Yep.
Animal digestive systems.
Yep.
Oh, there's more. There's more hard things here.
Can we just lift this up and put it over this thing?
Sorry.
For a sec. So again, as well as Jess looking at this for your benefits, and we obviously want to explore this, Jess's role as a vet in the moment, as right now, is to be pathologist. She's looking at the cause of death. She's looking at any issues. Are these stones? Are these bits of plastic? What are they? And it all helps us understand what sort of life this animal had.
I don't know what they are.
That's not a conker, is it?
I know. That's too hard to cut into. I don't know what that is. And this is what we were saying. You know, you can do these dissections hundreds of times, and you always find something new, something intriguing, and yeah, I don't know. Hopefully, we'll find out what that is.
Yeah, that's 2 of them. There shouldn't be. Yeah. Enjoying conkers. Don't know.
I would really like to stretch these intestines out, but the fat is so attached to them, they're just breaking.
Yeah. Are you done with the stomach, Jess?
Yeah, but that just broke when you pulled it.
Any more? A question? Yes.
So, you know how humans, they have like thyroid gases? Llamas have like massive
Yeah, so that would come from the glandular section. So in the first bit, they don't have anything like that, and then in the second part, they have all the chemical breakdowns. It'd be probably very similar to the acid and things that we have in our stomach.
Not quite the same strength, though.
No.
So to break down meat physically, if we're omnivores, carnivores, whatever, to break down meat, you get a much higher concentration of different acids, including hydrochloric. Something like this, it's that slow process. It's that long, it's like a war of attrition. Just break it down eventually, it'll get there. So it's definitely the same stuff, but just different composition, different strengths and everything. But. We've got any botanists in here? It's...
Avocado? Oh, no, it's not, is it?
No.
You need to find another one. Cultivator.
Get little baby llamas next spring. Llama tree. I don't know what that is. No idea what that is. It's one for Twitter. Yeah, it is, isn't it? It's solid. And sometimes also you can get bezoars. So if you've read Harry Potter, you get these little bezoar stones, whatever. They are a real thing where you get a ball of hair or something, or a foreign body that the body then usually puts sediment around, sort of granular stuff. Whereas this doesn't look like that at all. Yeah, it's not a conker. No, it's. I just did that and it dropped, and it sounds. It's too heavy for a conker. It could be a bezoar.
Could be a what?
A little concretion.
Could be.
I think, yeah, because if you look, there are distinct layers all the way around. Yeah. And it's just as they eat their grass, you often get silica, you can get sand and grit in there, and occasionally it accumulates and just builds up. I think it could be that. I'll have a look at that. I've got a couple of horse bezoars that are absolutely solid, that are just like beautifully polished marble almost. This looks really different though. But I think, because it's weird shape and because it's slightly layered inside, it could be a bezoar. They were highly prized until about the 1700s, and royalty thought that if you were poisoned, you would have someone who'd carry a bezoar next to them, that you would instantly make a tea with a bezoar in, because they were so magical, these things, but didn't work.
Look how beautiful these small intestines are.
Jess just said the word beautiful there, and usually I joke around with Jess about this sort of stuff, but I think it's really nice that we can say this is beautiful. Because yes, it's gross, yes, there's lots of weird and wonderful things in there, but there is a real beauty in this, and I think as a scientist, or a bunch of scientists, we can look at the different anatomy, we can look at the different functions, but actually it's quite a beautiful set of structures in these animals as well.
So after the food has gone to the stomach, it moves next to the small intestine, which I'm trying to isolate now. And I love how it fans out around this connective tissue here. So actually, you can imagine if we stretch this out, and it's just going to be too difficult to take apart because of all of that fat. But you can imagine if we stretch that out, it would be really super long. And again, that's because it's a herbivore. That's because even though it's turned into a lovely green soup there, it still takes lots and lots and lots more digestion to get all of the energy out of it.
Water as well, isn't it?
And what, sorry?
Water as
yes.
well.
Yeah.
If you imagine rabbits or sheep, they often come out as little tidy, solid poos. But what goes in actually is more like this to start with. It goes from that. If you imagine squeezing that and squeezing that, first of all, you get the nutrition, but also there's lots of water in there as well. So part of the reason having that very long series of intestines is to squeeze out as much water as possible, because these things, as Jess said, live at high altitude. There's not always a huge amount of water there, and they don't need to drink if they're getting all this liquid from the food they eat. And I can do this by squeezing this, but the same sort of issue is going on, the same sort of process is going on over time in its digestive tract as well.
So here you go.
Eventually you get something that looks more like that.
You're talking about how it comes out the other end?
So it goes in, perfect. It's like we're a well-oiled tea, me and you, Jess. It goes in all gloopy like this. It gets squished down in the large intestine and small intestine, and then eventually it comes out like a solid little poo at the end. Perfect. You had a question?
Yeah, it's not a question, but I was just going to say, the reason I asked about the intestines is I heard in like an information book that one of the intestines in like
Not in an adult human, us. We don't. So ours is about 6 meters, 6.5 meters. Someone might be correct me on that one. It's about 21 feet. So from where you are to where that cute little dog is over there, it goes from about there. So it's not a massive stomach. A gorilla, much longer. This should be longer as well. So the more herbivorous you are, the longer your stomach should be in relation to body size. But your stomach, your intestines definitely shouldn't go around the planet. It shouldn't even stretch the forum. If it does, you've got a problem. All right?
I think
Jess has passed me some poos. I've obviously upset her at some point. So we'll do a show and tell. It goes
we can probably stretch out the large intestine if you want along
from
here.
that
See how long it is.
To that. To that. And again, just think of the processes that, I mean, I can squeeze this, but think of the processes behind here where the body's doing the squeezing. It's turning it from this really slowly processed material into this stuff that's had all the water squeezed out and all the nutrients squeezed out as well. Now, some herbivores will eat their own poo.
Yes.
Is that you? Yes, you know, or yes, I also do that, Ben?
I know it.
Okay, thank goodness you said that.
Guinea pigs and rabbits.
Guinea pigs, rabbits, gorillas will often eat their poo 3 or 4 times because they've done all this, but they've not squeezed out all the nutrition, so they'll just sit there and they'll go.
So llamas prefer to do it at the other end. They prefer to chew it lots of times at the beginning.
Yeah,
I think I'd prefer that option.
I definitely prefer that one. You've got a question. What makes the poo round? That is a very good question. You know when you're on a beach and most of the stones are nicely round, it's because they're being rolled around in the sea against other rocks and stones for sometimes millions of years. We haven't got millions of years in this tummy, but the same sort of process. You're being squeezed through a tube. It's like toothpaste or being in a sleeping bag. You're being squeezed down, pushed around, and eventually it just gets squeezed into like a little round nugget like this. Now, there is an animal that makes square poos.
Oh.
Anyone know who makes square poos? And it's not me.
Ha.
A what? It's not a rabbit. It's not a meerkat. It's
From a long way away.
a wombat. Yes, perfect. I love you just turned up now. I've got the questions there already. Yes, it's a wombat. So wombats actually make square poos. And we think, well, there's a big debate as to why they make square poos. Some people think they do it, they can lay them on little ledges so they don't roll off the territorial. I don't know if I agree with that. How it happens is they've got ridges in their intestines and lower intestines, unlike the animals we've got here. So it's being rolled across these ridges and it just makes it goes from a nice round poo like this, but by being rolled and squeezed into little cubes, they have perfectly little square poos at the end. So when you go home, kids, Google wombat poo.
Ben, do you want
Yes.
to start laying this out? That's
Yep.
just broken there, but apart from that, will you take that and lay that up that end?
Yep.
You probably want to do it on the floor, or you're not allowed to put it on the floor.
You can put it on the floor.
I'd go put it because it's going to be long.
Yep.
So we're not going to unravel all of the small intestines, well, partly because we won't have space, but secondly, already it's going to stretch the whole way, I think. And this isn't even all of it. What's going on there?
Now remember this area here, you have the stomach at the top and then you've got the small intestines, as Jess said, but we're not going to unravel those because A, it takes ages, and B, it's really, really very delicate. But you could easily add another length of this floor again just by the small intestines here. So again, just think of why is it so long? Why does it have to be there? Evolution doesn't do anything for no reason. There's always a reason things happen in evolution. And it's because, as we've said, it's trying to get as many nutrients as given the grass and other fibrous material as long as possible in order to be digested. It's a huge amount of space in which to get all the water from as well. So there's always a reason behind these anatomical features that we see. Evolution is really lazy. It doesn't do anything if it doesn't have to. So there's nearly always a reason for something happening.
Oh, this is getting a bit too tricky in here because it's so fatty.
Oh, another question. Sorry, yeah. If we stretch the guts out, will it be as long as a giraffe?
I reckon longer.
Yeah, I reckon. Easily. Oh, another question. Yep.
Would it be that the largest animal would have the longest intestine, or is that not really?
Not always, because like a blue whale is the longest animal. Longest or smaller than... What is one of the baleen whales is the longest animal. It doesn't necessarily have the longest digestive system though, because they're only eating meat effectively. Yeah. So I don't know the exact answer, but I would almost think I would give it a run for its money with an elephant, possibly. Just because they're very slow fibrous materials, slow digesters. And actually most whales don't have a very long digestive system at all. Huge stomach, massive stomach, but not a massively long intestinal tract like you see here.
Would that mean that like a small animal, like a shark or a mouse or something, would have more compact minerals in its stomach?
Yeah, so something like not a hedgehog, like a cane rat, a big rodent like that sort of size, would have a much longer digestive system than a badger. Well, so just because it's smaller doesn't mean, so it's all depending on diet, it's all depending on what process. And the moment you start adding certain behaviours, like the gorilla, it saves it having an even longer digestive system. And we think partly the reason some of the big titanosaurs got so big was for that really slow digestive material. So do you know what a monkey puzzle tree is? Trees, that was the main food, Araucaria. Main food of things like Patagotitan, Argentinosaurus, really slow, really heavily digestible, undigestible material, and we think it took between 10 days, 2 weeks by the time they ate some, by the time it came out the other end. So by being so big and having... Yeah, but also imagine if you have to eat, we think Argentinosaurus, for example, had to eat about a skipful of food a day. And their heads were not much bigger than this, actually. So imagine that going through a skipful of food a day. That's a huge amount of energy. If you can eat that and then just stand there for a couple of days like, oh, and then just digest what's going through, you can have a massive gut. It just saves you doing all the extra work. It would save them eating 2 skips a day, so it's an energy saver as well. Again, remember, evolution's really lazy. It's like on a weekend, you don't want to get up, you want to stay in bed. Evolution doesn't want to waste energy. It wants to do as little as possible for maximum output. So it tries to find these tricks along the way. What are we doing, Jess?
So I've stretched the large intestine all the way out.
Yeah.
And it comes all the way around there, and that's not even including the small intestine, so
that is
lots of guts.
Impressive.
Should we look at liver now?
The what?
The liver.
Yeah.
So does anybody know what the liver's for? Yeah? A bit of that, yeah. Yeah, so its main role, well actually it has lots of roles, but it's the body's filter. So it's all about getting rid of nasty things that particularly come in the digestive tract. Right. So fats, it breaks down those into smaller parts that are easier to digest. Toxins, it detoxifies those. So if, for example, the llama ate some sort of poisonous plant, the liver would be working really hard to try and either break that down or combat it by releasing some chemicals and things like that. It's got an incredible blood supply because that takes lots of energy doing all of that detoxifying. And it's got some amazing blood vessels inside. Let me grab a knife.
This one?
You can keep that, thank you. And it's really heavy as well. Let's have a look. Oh, it's quite tricky to see. Yeah, so you can see there, it's got these huge blood vessels inside it. There's not many other organs apart from the heart that would have these. Well, you actually can't see them very well there. I'm just going to have a look through here to check there's no parasites as well, because quite often you can get parasites in the liver, and this is just an important part of the post-mortem to check there's nothing living inside the liver that shouldn't be. So you can see as I cut through it, there's loads of holes. It looks like a holy cheese, and that's where all the blood vessels go, and that's quite often where some of these parasites like to hang out. So
when you say parasites, what do you mean? What sort of parasites?
Flukes like to live in the liver, so they're things that you would be able to see. They can be like this big. They're sort of wormy looking things. Or sort of round body sometimes. There's all different types. Obviously there might be stuff living in here that I won't be able to see, that you'd need a microscope to see. But some of them are literally like, you know, they're that big. You can see them as you cut into the liver. So just need to check there's nothing like that.
If you've got cats and dogs at home, we worm our cats and dogs and we give them all flea treatment and stuff like that to make sure they don't get a couple of parasites. And a couple don't really hurt, they're not a massive issue, but there can be, as Jess was saying, if they do get parasites, it can be a sign of poor health. And if they get so many, it can actually cause bad health. I don't know about you, Jess, but I've done dissections on things like porpoises and dolphins where there are so many parasites, they come from the lungs, up the trachea, and out the blowhole and actually suffocate the animal. So parasite load can be absolutely deadly, as well as physically making you very sick beforehand.
And to be honest, as this was a zoo animal, it probably has been regularly wormed, so I wouldn't expect to find anything. It's just, you have to be thorough with these things. Where's the spleen gone? You know, go through all of the organs in a regular way to make sure there's nothing going on. I think this spleen looks a bit odd, but I think it's just because it's old, as in the animal is old.
So what does the spleen do?
So the spleen is all about making it's all about blood and producing new, hang on, just let me think about this one. Production of blood cells. That all looks fine. I wonder why that's probably a bit late to do a sample now, isn't it? Yeah. I think that's just normal old age change.
And the good thing about being any sort of scientist, whatever area you go into, is you're constantly learning all the time. So as much as we're teaching you today, we're learning as well. So what Jess and I just hearing Jess say now is this because it's old? Is it because it's sick? Is it because it's old? The more we do as scientists, the more we're learning on the job all the time. So we'll be learning all the way through our careers. So Jess at the moment is to see whether the changes or the differences she's seeing in this spleen, for example, are because the animal was old, was it sick, is there something wrong, well, was there something wrong with it? It's a really important part of science to keep questioning and keep learning and keep developing your skills all the way through your career and your life, really. So Jess has taken samples now, which we can look at later. Remember, this is a real, genuine post-mortem that we are doing, well, Jess is doing for the zoo.
Where are we at? What are you dissecting out there?
I'm just taking the other back leg off for later. For the barbecue. Jokes.
Where are we at now? Oh, kidneys.
Yeah.
Could I just look at that post-mortem form, please?
Any more questions, anyone? You know we want questions galore. Perfect. Jess, did you always know you wanted to be a vet when you were little?
My mum was actually looking at like the books from when I was little the other day, and where it says like what you want to be when you grow up. And they were all animal things. They were like farmer, zookeeper, marine biologist. Vet was on there, but it wasn't regularly on there. And I did some work experience at the vets when I was a teenager, and I actually didn't like it that much. So I didn't go straight into being a vet. I did a zoology degree first. And then I thought I really wanted to work with gorillas, and so I went back to train to be a vet, to be a gorilla vet. And now I'm chopping up llamas outside the forum. So that's an interesting career path. Let me just have a look through this form.
And especially for the younger members of the audience, it's always worth remembering there's no definite way to become a scientist. There are a million different types of scientists, but also there's a million different ways of becoming a scientist as well. There's no, if you ask 100 different scientists what their career path was, they'll all be different, I think. They're all slightly tailored, slightly different to each other.
Okay.
Do you want me to
I'm not
move?
seeing bladder very clearly.
Is the bladder going to be...
It shouldn't be that far
Shouldn't be
back.
far down, should it?
What is all of the... For some reason, the kidneys are into much.
Is that on? Look.
I feel that fat and everything. I'm so a bit lost. This fat is really confusing. It's wrapped everything up, and all the organs just look the same. That is just fat.
Yeah. So Jess, we've just said a few times now, Jess is going through this. This is the first llama that any of us have dissected. So when we do more in the future, we can almost use this one as a baseline. So is this fat normal? We'll know in the future. Is this unusual for this species? Is it just the females or just the old ones? Or we just build up a picture. The more we do of these, the more we learn as well.
And that's what we do at vet school as well. We look at the insides of loads of different animals, loads of normal ones, and then, you know, when someone comes in and says, is Fluffy's lump on his right leg normal? We know, because we've seen so many dogs, and we've seen on average they do or they don't have that feature.
Yeah.
Where's the bladder? Is that the bladder then? Or is it wrapped up in that fat there?
Another lovely thing about doing this is when we look at textbooks,
that's it.
textbooks are beautiful and they show you exactly where things should be. Nature's not like that, so they get wrapped in fat or they get twisted, or they get turned. So
That wasn't just fat, that was a wrapped up bladder.
And Jess is demonstrating that perfectly now, because we've just found where the bladder was. Wrapped up in a load of fat. Which isn't normal, is it, Jess?
No, well,
Really?
I don't think so. Not for any other animals. It's going to be really hard to get that out, I think.
There's a lot of... There's a lot of fluid in this knee, actually. Load of fluid in this knee.
Oh, really? They did
Loads.
actually ask me to look at the joints.
Load of fluid. Really soft.
And they
as well.
wanted us, I mean, I don't know if we want to do it now, but I need to dissect down into the spine because it had a weird stance.
Okay, but that's,
So-
that's not normal.
No.
Load of... And that's really horrible tissue.
Might be worth dissecting out that knee joint then.
Okay.
Stifle joint, I should say.
Can we put their hand up? No. The nice thing with this sort of stuff as well is you never quite know when you might need this for future research. So when we were looking, not we, but when the scientific community were looking at the impacts of pollutants, they looked at things like peregrine birds or peregrine falcon eggs in museums from hundreds of years ago sometimes to compare the thickness of those eggs with modern day eggs to see how they'd become thinner because of toxic chemicals in the environment. So actually by doing these dissections, by keeping the bones, keeping the material, you never quite know when they might be used in the future as well. So there's also that we can hopefully use for future research, future teaching, future understanding.
I'm really, this is the uterus. It's huge. I wonder if he's ever had a baby. Have a cable tie, please.
So what are you doing, Jess?
I'm just cutting. I've been looking at this organ here, wondering if it was the uterus, but it just seems far too big because normally when most animals are not pregnant, the female reproductive parts are actually quite small, but I guess she's a big animal. I think this is uterus, and it does look maybe a little abnormal, but... Let's have a look. Let's get it out. Would be really cool if you guys could reflect, if you go down through this fat here and reflect sort of the skin and the tissues completely off the skeleton, because I'd quite like to look at her spine, because apparently she had some problems with her spine. So this is the uterus, which you would expect to be quite a symmetrical. You'd expect sort of both of the uterine horns to be a similar size, unless, of course, there was a pregnancy on one side. But I'm sure she was too old to have been pregnant. So let's have a little look inside and see what's going on there.
So if anyone doesn't know, the uterus is the little chamber, I don't know what the best way to call it, little sleeping bag-like structure in which the embryos develop in the
Also
mothers.
known as the womb.
Also known as the womb, yeah. And again, it's another thing that we see in textbooks. It's all very well showing what perfect conditions should look like, but already I've heard Jess saying it depends how old she was, depends how many offspring she'd had. All these things determine the structure and the appearance of some of these organs as well.
I think she's got a cystic ovary. I think that's what yeah, that's a cyst. It's just about one of the only abnormal things I've found so far in this post-mortem are a cyst in her ovary. Her ovary is where the eggs develop. So that would be, so this is where the baby would grow inside this organ, and obviously this material's really, really stretchy. It can get bigger and bigger, because a baby llama is going to be, they're about this big when they're born. They're sort of dog-sized when they're born, or Labrador-sized. Now this should be really small, the ovary here, especially in an old llama. But I think what's happened here is she's tried to release an egg and it hasn't quite worked properly, and so it's formed a cyst instead, and that might be why that whole side is so distended.
Would that explain why there was fat around it as well, possibly, or?
I think just everything's covered in fat in this llama, to be honest.
But can you see from that whether the cyst would have caused infection? Was it a problem for her, or was it just one of these things?
No, it's totally enclosed. The outside of it is totally smooth, so the body had just sealed it off and was dealing with it. It could have been there for a while. Sometimes these things stay in the body for ages, and the body does such a good job of sealing them off in like a perfect little circle that it doesn't cause any problems. Okay. Oh, should we have a look at the joints?
Mm-hmm.
Considering she had arthritis, that's a beautiful joint.
So I thought that.
Well, maybe around there. There's a few spurs there, but...
Not much, though.
No, that's super smooth. So when an animal has arthritis, you would expect in its joints. So this is a ball and socket joint. And normally that should be really, really smooth so that it can move perfectly in its socket. But when you get arthritis, you get sort of like little lumps, little spiky bits on there. And that obviously makes it more difficult for the joint to move smoothly, and also really painful, because the rubbing of those spikes can be really painful. We know that this animal definitely had trouble walking, but it doesn't look like it was in the hip joint. So, oh no, that's just a... Let's have a look at the stifle joint and see if the pain might have been in there.
And the nice thing is that, judging by the crowd, we've got different levels of joint pain here today. So that delicately as I can. I get pain in my joints. I've had surgery from arthritis, but we get it as we age, naturally. And what's lovely to see is there are different types of joints in the body. So as Jess said, this is a ball and socket joint. There's the ball, and there's the socket. And it fits in really nicely. It allows this rotation that we can go up and down, around the side and around, and it allows this wonderful mobility that we get in our hips and also our shoulders as well in our, up in this area here. You've got different ones, sliding joints, such as your wrist, where they just slide over one another in quite weird angles. This is often why you break a wrist, because it's not enclosed in the same sort of way, wrists and ankles. And you get other joints that only move in one direction, like your finger joints. Your fingers should not move side to side very much at all. They just go up and down. The same with this lovely hinge joint, your elbows as well. So different joints allow different types of movement within the body. But going through a post-mortem like this, Jess can look at the kind of levels of wear and tear that she can see that she might expect from an animal of this age. Now, she said that already from the zookeepers, we've been told that this animal had mobility issues, so she couldn't walk around completely easily. And Jess is just now seeing whether that goes into the body, and we can see whether it was just feeling a bit sort of tired, or whether that actually had any issues in her joints.
Yeah, so sometimes the inflammation can be in the soft tissue, and that would be really difficult to see in a post-mortem, because there are so many changes after the animal dies in the soft tissue anyway. But if the pain was caused by bony structures, then we would definitely be able to see it now. But again, this one looks quite smooth. There's maybe some little osteophytes in there, but...
So I take it it's an incredibly small amount of roughness that would cause problems and arthritis. So even though something we think, well, that looks absolutely fine, it's really smooth. Yep. It's the tiniest amount.
And that's it. I mean, anyone in here who does any form of exercise, if you just get a slight ache and pain, it's enough to make you feel a bit rubbish. And it doesn't need to be very much, but it can be, as you say, the smallest amount of change can have massive issues.
And we, as laymen, we wouldn't be able to tell which one was the arthritic
No.
and which one wasn't.
No.
Someone like yourself.
And even, as Jess said, even a post-mortem like this, looking for these tiny changes that look, I mean, this is really beautifully smooth. It's lubricated. You've got this synovial fluid, this tissue, there's this lubricating oil, basically, moving over with this cartilage as well. It looks lovely. I mean, to me, there doesn't look any arthritic
The only thing I
change.
think is there's a tiny little bit there, but
it's...
I love this as well. Look at this movement. So.
But yeah, I mean, the average, it's not obvious. When you're looking at massive change, you get these sort of bony growths. It's easy. At this,
We just appreciate how sensitive our central nervous system is and our detection system to pain. Like, we can't even visually see what's causing the problem, but yes.
oh yeah, and it would have been a real issue. She would have felt that pain. She would have felt enough that eventually she was euthanized because of.
It's pretty amazing at picking up slight.
Oh, completely. And remember, especially prey animals, herbivores don't want to show any form of pain. They don't want to show they're hurt, they're weak, they're vulnerable, because they get picked off very easily. So the fact she was showing something, there definitely was an issue somewhere.
Are you definitely on the correct leg?
Well, no. It could be any of the legs. They didn't tell us that. So.
Well, it could also be in the spinal column as well. It could be something in the backbone that
They
had an
did say
issue.
the way she held her back was not normal. So I'm quite interested to look at.
So we know that for us, humans, for example, by the time you hit mid-30s and definitely in your 40s, about 25% of us have significant bony change in our spinal column associated with osteoporosis, with arthritic change. To the point when you hit your 50s, 60s, very often you get what's called kissing osteophytes, where they'll start to physically fuse together. And that happens at different stages of my life. I had an injury when I was younger that caused arthritis in my neck. So any of these things can have an impact on the animal. So it might be something right in the middle of the thoracic that's just causing pain in her lower limbs, maybe. So Jess is now looking into the spinal column to see whether there's any arthritic change in there as well that might explain it. Anything obvious so far?
I can't even see the bone yet, to be honest. What would be really helpful right now is if we had an X-ray and we knew exactly where it was, and then we could just go directly to that. But
That'd be nice, wouldn't it?
yeah.
So even with two people who very often do autopsies and postmortems like this, trying to find something that might be a problem somewhere, where do you start? We've looked at the obvious places. It's not in the knees, not in the hips.
And that's the thing about being a vet in general as well, is like if this was a human, they could have told us when they came in with pain exactly where the pain was. But obviously a llama can't say, oh, I've got a pain in my left knee or whatever. You kind of have to look at the way that they're compensating and like which, but they don't always, it's not always obvious, you know. It can take a long time to locate a lameness. And then you, and also, again, like Ben said, in a type of animal that is, it wants to hide its pain because it's a prey animal, and so it's frightened of being eaten all the time. If it shows any kind of weakness, that's going to make it a target. So even if you can try and exacerbate their lamenesses by doing stretch tests and things like that, but they really don't want to show you where the pain is. And then in a zoo situation, also you've got to think about if you're going to do x-rays and things like that, how are you going to do it? With this sort of animal, you may have to anaesthetise them or get them to stand really still and then take a field x-ray out there. But it can be really, really hard to work out exactly where the pain is. And then, if you did locate where it was, if it's arthritis, probably all you can do is give them pain relief anyway. So there's limited benefit to finding out exactly where the pain is.
And I hate to say it, there's not a huge amount of conservation value in a llama. So in terms of a zoo, as Jess said, if there's something that you can't really recover from that's going to look, it looks quite bad, you've got an animal that's limping around, very often the kindest, most compassionate thing to do and financially beneficial thing to do is to euthanize it as soon as you've got a problem that you know is chronic that it's not going to recover from. Very often it's a case of, well, it's the kindest measure. Yeah, thankfully.
That's one of the things I feel really grateful for being a vet, is that when you see these animals and they're really suffering and they're in pain and there's not much you can do, you've reached the limit with your pain relief, you know, we can stop them from suffering anymore. I think I'm very privileged to be able to help them with that.
Yeah. So much fat.
I know. Is that the pelvis there?
Yeah.
I can't even get to these joints.
It's 3 o'clock. Half an hour.
Anything else you want to talk about? Anything else in particular you want to talk about?
Not really. We can just keep going a little bit longer. So we have gone through the whole process so far of a physical necropsy or post-mortem to look through, physically look through the anatomy of this animal to see what was wrong with her, to see any sort of background health issues that might have led to her condition.
And actually, there's been hardly anything wrong with her.
I was going to say, in terms of...
Yeah.
So what are your findings, Jess, so far?
So far, everything's been pretty normal. A lot of excess fat. The spleen looked a little bit old, but I think they were just normal age-related changes. There was a cyst in the ovary. I wouldn't say that was anything that would have contributed to her quality of life. So I think probably just, unfortunately, this pain in her joints was enough to make her day-to-day life really uncomfortable. And everything else was really well. I mean, she was obviously eating really well. Her stomach was really full. There was lots of normal feces in her colon, so she was digesting well and normally. She was obviously getting the energy she needed out of her food because there was so much fat on her. The condition of her was really good. Yeah, pretty good specimen, really.
Now, Jess has taken samples that we'll take away, or she'll take away, and we can do testing on those extra samples of the spleen, as she said. But overall, this is typically, not usually in front of a big audience like this, but this is typically what a vet would do or a biologist would do in different situations. I've done these things in the field before, so in jungles, on the savannah, to see why different animals have died for different reasons, on the beaches with whales and even sharks and turtles. So by doing this, we can look at everything from plastic ingestion right through to pollutants, right through to hunting, and in a veterinary setting, zoos as well. So these really do help us tell a story. And using these with genetics and a whole range of different other processes, it's just, again, part of the arsenal that we have as scientists to explore a little bit more about these animals from both an evolutionary sense, and also a veterinary sense, a welfare sense, a biology sense as well. So we're here for the next 10, 15, 20 minutes. Anyone got any more questions?
Yeah,
I mean, some of you have been great. You've been here all day, some of you, which is amazing, whilst eating cupcakes. I love that you're doing that.
Have we got any spoons?
You're my sort of child, you really are.
Yeah, no.
What sort of jobs do you need to... Oh. So we have a vet today, which is the obvious one. I'm an evolutionary biologist, so I work at the university and I've studied animals all around the world. We've got Catherine over there, who's one of our amazing lab technicians at the university. We've got Charlie, who's a master's student, who's looking at people's views on zoos and conservation messages. And we've got Ellen, who is hopefully soon going to be starting as a veterinary student as well. There's lots of different ways. Loads of different ways you can do it. There are people who are scientists, who are biologists and vets, and pretty much there's no one way of doing it. And the nice thing is, there's no one job you have to have as well. We've got friends in the forum today who go and look at birds in the Caribbean or the Maldives, who look at tiny little bits of plastic they eat. I've got friends in there as well who study fish in the Norfolk Broads, who are biologists and ecologists who do exactly the same thing. So there's lots of different ways that you can be a scientist who not just work with dead stuff like this, because I work with live stuff and dead stuff, and so everyone here works with both live and dead things as well. But the cool thing is, there are thousands of different types of scientists out there. So it's just go and explore, I think is the best way, and see what sort of scientist you can become.
Some of the bigger zoos also have their own pathologists. So, you know, in big collections where animals are dying relatively frequently, so a pathologist would be there to look at all of the animals when they die, to do the post-mortems, but also to look at samples of animals that are still living, but samples that have been taken from the vet when things are going wrong. So they're people who are specially trained in how bodies work, and also the things that go wrong with them, and they'd be really good at looking at samples under the microscope, for example, urine samples, blood samples, all the kinds of different samples you can take. And then a big part of their job as well would be, because every single animal that comes out of a zoo has to have a post-mortem, so even from the really small stuff, like Ben was saying before, everything has to be looked at inside, so that would be literally their whole job every day, looking inside the animals that have died in the collection, and seeing what had happened, and just making sure it was nothing that had gone wrong in the zoo, and just learning more about their bodies, yeah.
Another question. I didn't mean to point a knife, sorry. How do dolphins make their noises? Okay, I do know.
Is it the melon? Is it to do with the melon? Yeah.
So the only ones that, well, not the only ones, sorry, the ones that make the most noise are the toothed whales, like our dolphin here. And they have a big lump at the front, big fatty lump, where are you? There. Big fatty lump called the melon. And it's a way of focusing beams of noise, of vibrations. It also receives vibrations. If they're bouncing out sound and you're a bunch of fish, and the vibrations from you come back, they receive it in the melon and also the jaw. But that's not how they make their sound. So a lot of them have these special little valves, they're called phonic lips, that sit just above the blowhole. And if you imagine a balloon, and the bottom of the balloon, that little bit that ties together, if you ever like pinged it and it makes that weird sort of plucking sound, they have something like that attached near the melon, and by controlling that with a series of muscles, causes pulling and releasing on that melon. And And they can do that really quickly, depending on different species. And that can pulse out sound waves and vibrations, and in some species, to the point you can hear it as well. So some of the big tooth whales, including sperm whales, can make that. Some can physically make it when they're at the surface. So when dolphins come up in that... My amazing dolphin impression there.
That was pretty good. I was very impressed
I mean, I
with
expect a round of applause, but no one bothered. You're so fickle, you lot. They can physically do that in their mouths and trachea, and the same way that Jess showed you, or we showed you earlier with the llama. They can also do it underwater, so some of that, like the ones you hear in Finding Nemo, the humpbacks, for example, can do it underwater whilst holding their breath. It's just like you being under in a bath or a swimming pool and making that very loud noise. Have you just punctured it?
Oh yeah, I was trying really hard. I need a spoon. That's normally my... Yeah, popped it. Sorry guys. Sorry to interrupt. That was really interesting, Ben, but I just...
That's all right. No, the good news, you've got another one to do.
Well, there's
can we get the lens
Yeah,
out?
well, that's kind of just...
Yeah. Okay. So that's the best way I can... Yes. Do all animals have cartilage in their nose? I'm going to say to mammals, first of all, because I'm going to narrow that down. Do all mammals have cartilage? I want to say yes.
No, I want to say yes. I can't think of one that wouldn't. Oh, I guess like a snub-nosed monkey wouldn't.
They'll still have the septum.
Yeah.
So they don't have a physical nose like we do. And Jess said like a snub-nosed monkey, so something called Rhinopithecus, which means nose monkey. The ones you see in Attenborough programs that have like no big nose at all, they'll still have a tiny bit of cartilage separating the two parts of the skull. So in our chimp, for example, hang on, stop there, things. So that's a cast of a skull with no cartilage in there. Even though a chimp hasn't got imagine a chimp with a nose like ours would be really weird.
I could dissect out the cartilage of this if you want.
Cartilage between there as well. Yeah, if we can see we'll show you the cartilage, or Jess will show you the cartilage in this chimp. But I think
in this
chimp in this not this chimp, in this llama. Every mammal that I can think of should have cartilage in the nose. Now an elephant won't necessarily have down its trunk, for example. It might have some, like small amounts, but not like we do in our snout. What am I doing?
I always find this bit the most extraordinary transformation when it goes from a really obvious sort of face that we recognise to the skull. Makes quite a difference, doesn't it? So we've cut the nostrils off there. Oh, thank you. Maybe for the other side.
Give them back to the cafe when you're done.
Thank you.
Did you tell them what it was for?
Nope.
I don't know if they'll want it back.
I love the Science Festival.
So that whole lip structure
Yeah.
it's just basically a big flap. It's not really attached very much to anything. But these have loads of muscles in them, so they can move independently, and obviously the nostrils, so they can open and close as well. So it's actually a really sophisticated piece of skin. But underneath, we've just got the skull there, which obviously looks quite different when it hasn't got all of that tissue on top of it.
Oh, tail.
And let's see if we can dissect away the, get to the cartilage.
Yeah, I'll just colour it. Did anyone think this would be really gross today and had their mind changed and really enjoyed it unexpectedly? Brilliant, brilliant. That's what I like. I don't know what you're smelling because I haven't got a sense of smell. Jess, what is everyone smelling?
Now I think most of the intestinal smell has gone, and it's just sort of just the flesh, really. The blood actually smells quite bad, the congealed blood. I don't really know exactly what causes the smell, but...
There are even sugars that are released in
Yeah.
there. So I've got, for full disclosure, I've lost my sense of smell when I was a kid, but I can taste certain things in different ways that you don't. And I know it's different the way you don't, because for me, this tastes like a creme brulee. So all I can taste in my mouth, apart from when I was inflating those lungs earlier, is creme brulee for the last 3 hours. I hate creme brulees. Yeah. But it's because I can detect the sugars. So my tongue is detecting the sugars released by this. So I know there are definitely sugars. So anything dead is really sickly sweet.
That what you're tasting now is creme brulee, and not every time you're eating a creme brulee, you're tasting llama?
Well, I do now. That's why I don't eat creme brulees. But I can remember eating creme brulee before I lost my sense of smell, and I can remember detecting a dead thing after losing my sense of smell. I was like, there's a creme brulee around here somewhere, and it was a dead fox.
Yeah, and there probably are quite a lot of sugars because, like we were saying before, there's loads of bacteria feeding on all of this now. So they're probably breaking stuff down into simple sugars. So that would make sense. Oh, I love this jaw. Look at it. Amazing. I'm still so impressed. Can you see those canine teeth? I'm so impressed by them. And in a male, they would be much bigger. I mean, twice the size of that.
There was some of those skulls we've got over there behind us, the chimp skull, for example. Even though that chimp doesn't necessarily use them to eat its prey, it has those big teeth, and they're actually quite small in that chimp. That's a female, I think. Again, like Jess is saying, these are for display. So even our teeth are used for eating, but there are other functions for teeth as well. So they'd be used for displaying to each other. They would show rank, social rank, and there are some monkeys, like mandrills, for example, where the females won't breed with a male until they're a certain length. I think it's 3 or 4 centimeters in length.
So you can see that. You can see that the septum, which divides the 2 nostrils, 1 nostril there and 1 nostril there, and then up here. Oh, perfect. Thank you. Oh, that's a relief. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Up here is a really, really rich blood supply, which is why sometimes if you bash the front of your nose, or if she got a bash there, you can get quite a lot of blood come out of the nose, because that's where all the smelling is done. So, yeah, this area in here, up inside here, really rich blood supply, really rich nerve supply, does all the smelling of their food. And probably, I'm not 100% sure about the hormone signals in llamas, but probably, I imagine, that's where they do the sensing of hormones when the males and females are in season. Do you know anything about that, Ben?
Yeah. Also a big blood supply up there because it also helps with the warming and cooling.
Yeah.
You said that? Of air coming in or out.
And it's folded, the skin inside here, hopefully we'll see, it's got lots of folds, which just allows, again, a greater surface area. It might be easier to see on this side. For all of that to take place.
Do you ever get people really interested in the field when it comes to dissection? Maybe I can't.
I've had that a couple of times in the field where the question was, do you ever have anyone come out who wants to show an interest and then they just can't? I've had a couple of people who really are keen on just getting their hands in, and and it's always the big tough bloke, in it. Oh, I can't wait to have a look inside that. And then I'm going to go do something else over here.
There were people on my vet course like that who, you know, they were the really mouthy ones before you went in, and then you'd get into the dissection room and then, boo! One of them left, actually. He didn't complete the course. But you do get used to it as well. I mean, there is a certain amount of getting used to it. And I think also the sort of first incisions, it's like when it goes from being an animal and then you make the first incision. I find that the weirdest bit. And then once you're inside, you're so engrossed in what you're seeing. And obviously I'm doing a job, I'm looking for changes and things like that. I'm so focused on that. Yeah, it's you kind of almost forget, not forget, but like you don't focus on the fact that it's an animal. But even now, still, the first incision sometimes, when I'm doing sort of down there, it's like I'm doing surgery because I'm used to doing so much abdominal surgery. But cutting around the face, I still find that a little bit weird, like that moment of it going from an entire animal to a skull. But then I just find this anatomy underneath so fascinating, and by now I'm just focused on that. But yeah, I think.
Yeah, it will do.
I think you never completely get over it. What were we going to say about the nostrils?
What were we going to say about them? You're going to show
something about the cartilage.
You're going to show the cartilage and just where it is and how far down it goes. So you saw where the nose came earlier. Nose came right down to here somewhere, but the cartilage itself finishes there.
Yeah. And then it's got like a smooth transition. I wonder if you can see that. So if you have a look at...
Jess, are you done with all the abdominal stuff, the soft tissue? Are you finished?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. What would be great is to come behind here.
So if you have a look at these ones here...
As much of this out as you're able to.
Yeah, this is pretty similar, for example.
Right.
So,
yeah.
say this was the llama skull here, you'd have an extra cartilaginous bit here, and that's basically like our nose. So the bone in this actually probably stops there, and that's all just cartilage there, which you can see is much more rubbery than bone, and that's just what gives the shape to the snout.
If we're just looking at
and
this,
holds the nostrils open.
Should we turn this so the head's over there for now? I'd like that leg off, but you can also show the audience.
You want that leg?
Yes, but if we turn the whole thing over, the audience can see.
Okay, yeah.
Charlie, I'm just going to move this over, that's all right. If you go that side and pull this.
Oh, I see. Well, I can tell none of you are vets, because if you were vets, you would have turned that the other way, because in a surgery, you don't want the lungs to be compressed. And the lungs would have been very compressed if you'd turned that over there. That's fine. Definitely not using its lungs right now, so.
That's it. We'll sort those ribs.
So there, look, you can see right up its nostrils. And the folds as well inside there to increase the surface area for the heating and cooling of the air and for the smelling as well.
If you start going under and taking back that tissue.
And just like cows, they don't have any teeth on the top here. They just have these bottom incisors. So basically, when they would, all they use the front of their mouth for is for pulling up grass. So you can see that just makes sort of a scoop. They clamp it in there and then pull the grass up. They're not doing any real biting through what they're doing. They're just pulling with these front ones. And then these ones here are all about, they do in a sort of side-to-side motion, they're all about grinding, those ones. And they do get really, really worn down over the course of their life as well. And you can see they fit together perfectly for doing the grinding of grass and things like that, yeah.
And llamas smell the same as humans?
Oh, I don't know about the same as humans. I mean, animals all have different capabilities when it comes to smell. So, for example, dogs really rely on their sense of smell. I wouldn't say llamas really rely on their sense of smell. It's not one of their primary ones. They've got these big eyes, and they're very much about looking around. I'd say that's probably would that be the sense they most rely on, do you think, Ben?
What was the question?
Sight.
Sight and hearing, yeah.
And hearing as well, yeah. They've got these huge ears, which are great for funneling sound down into their ears. Smelling, I think the main thing that they would probably be smelling for would be around the breeding season and pheromones of other...
Breeding season and also calving as well. So when mums have their calves... Was your question?
It's like a bonding, thing between...
Yeah, they'll leave and come back and really make sure it's their baby. So it's really smelling that. And also... they all look the same. Even to the llamas, they're like, well, is that my baby? Oh, yeah. So they smell really close up, and they'll smell when they're trying to mate with each other. But remember, imagine where they live. They live on really high plateaus, really high parts of the mountains, where there might be another llama right over there. And you're like, oi, oi. You're not going to smell him over there or her over there. You're just like, well, first of all, I can see him. Yeah. Do I want to fight? I don't know. So it's more important to have the vision and also that hearing as well, because they'll make those noises at shorter distances. It's only when they're really close up, and you haven't got to have the amazing sense of smell to smell someone there. So it's not like it's a polar bear that can smell food from miles away. Just think why they need their sense of smell. So unless it's for really long distance communication, don't bother. So you can either have not many animals have really good vision and smell and hearing. So you're going to usually have one or two of those. So these things, they need their sight, their hearing, smells, and extra, really.
While we're on the topic of babies, these animals are pregnant for quite a long time. Does anybody know how long a human is pregnant for? 9 months, yeah. So do you think a llama is pregnant for more or less time than a human? More? Yeah, so any ideas how long? Not quite that long, but nearly a year, just over 11 months they're pregnant for. And they think that that's because the mating and breeding season is within a small window at the same time of year when the weather's really good, and because obviously a small llama is much more susceptible to the elements than an adult. So yeah, there's just one time of year when most of the llamas are born, and they're normally born in the morning as well, within, I can't remember exactly the times, but within a real narrow window of time, which again is the time of day when the weather is the mildest, and the crias, the babies are called crias, the time of day when the crias are most likely to do well and survive. And they don't have the same sort of reproductive cycle that we do. When they mate, that causes them to release an egg, and that's because they don't actually often mate that often. So when they do mate, they need to make sure that an egg is going to be released. Well, llamas are a domestic species, so there's nothing that's specifically a llama. But guanacos are there.
Guanacos, so they come there. There'll be birds of prey. Birds of prey will.
Birds of prey.
Young ones.
Yeah, baby. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're talking some of these condor, no, not condors, but some of that sort of almost condor size. So I've seen golden eagles in the UK take red deer calves, which are the size of Labradors still. Just pick them up and take them off up in the run.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah.
Wow. Puma, I was going to say
yeah,
as well.
Pumas will. So some of the big cats will. They're just within the range of mountain lions in some areas. But also remember, these are back right into Pleistocene. So in the Pleistocene in South and Central America, we had a whole range of bone-crushing dogs that are about up here somewhere. So if you're a Game of Thrones fan, everything from dire wolves to bone-crushing dogs that make hyenas look like wimps were running around Central and South America. So back in the Pleistocene, we had some of the camelid family that were 2.5, 3 meters at the shoulders. So there's a massive group again that lived down there. So there's a whole range of predators, both now and more importantly, historically as well, prehistorically. Yep. Is there a dinosaur closely related to this? No. It's as closely related as you are to a dinosaur, basically. So the last...
But there would have been animals around at the time of the dinosaurs that were closely related to them, if that's what you mean.
There are mammals there were a whole bunch of mammals. So everyone thinks they were just like shrew-like. There was a whole range of mammals living at the same time as dinosaurs. Some were massive, some were quite small. The closest dinosaurs we have to us, not including the birds, the dromaeosaurs. So things like Dromaeosaurus, getting near Velociraptor area, that sort of area. But no, we're separated from them by about easily 240 million years. So we go back to things like the Dimetrodon. You know Dimetrodon, which looks like half a dinosaur, half a reptile, half a mammal. It was none of those things, and yet sort of some of those things combined. We're more related to that than we are to any of the dinosaurs. So the answer is ish, no. But it's a really hard one to say. Because I'm now going to say...
Because it's how close is the link? That's
also you, not just you, but all of this group of people are 50% cucumber.
Yeah, exactly. So it depends what your measure is, whether you're measuring DNA.
Yeah, at your DNA level, you share 50% of your DNA. I love that that's the thing that's got you today. You share 50% of your DNA with a cucumber. It's not murder. No, it's not fight. It's not a relative. Well, it is kind of. Next time you, oh my God, this has gone a really horrible route suddenly. Yeah, we share, basically it's like a recipe. You know how you can have 10 recipes and very often you're using flour, egg and milk, but you make things that are completely different each time? It's the same with genetics. So you might have lots of the same parts of that recipe, there's little extra bits. You might add sugar to that recipe, but you might add, I don't know, sultanas to that one or pepper to that one. It's those extra little bits at the end, but you're very often starting with the same. So in terms of how related are we to dinosaurs, quite related. You're talking about 70%, 60%, 70%, whereas remember, still 50%, cucumber, potato, tomato. Mind blown.
Just got back here and that's the thing I hear. We're 50% related to
You should have seen what you missed there. You've missed so much. Oh, I love the science festival. Don't start. I am not starting that one. Professor Ben Garrod at a public dissection says vegans. No. Oh no. So we are just we're pretty much finished now. So we are just. You can stay here as long as you want, but we were here till 3:30. But obviously we're all a bunch of nerds, so we're just going to carry on for a wee bit. You guys have been brilliant today. So thank you so much, everyone who's been here throughout today. It's been lovely, and seeing some of you drop in and drop out again. I hope you've enjoyed it, obviously. You all look like you have. And it's been really lovely. It's been really lovely talking to you lot. Still lots of questions. If you've got any questions, let us know.
You know how the nostrils were held open by the cartilage? So this is made of the same rubbery stuff. It's not bone, it's cartilage. And again, it's got another tube there that... Pardon?
So that's where the sound goes through.
Yeah, so the sound goes through there. Yeah, exactly right. And then inside there will be a membrane that vibrates when the sound goes in there, and then that's turned into a neural impulse which goes to the brain, and you hear it as sound. And obviously they're funneling a lot of sound into here, so they're really good at hearing. That's what these are for. All the sound waves bounce against that, go down there. Yeah, exactly like that. But instead of bouncing light waves, it's bouncing sound waves. Exactly the same as that, yeah.
These are quite good. I've just borrowed your knife. Do you want it back?
Did anyone get anywhere near the...
Can I just give you that to grab and just pull off for me, please? Watch your fingers.
Is that right? Is that right? Is that what you want? I always find it amazing when you think about how thick the neck was when we started, and then once you actually get down to the skeleton, how small and narrow it is. And most of it was just soft tissue rather than bone. Bit of what? Oh, thank you, that's all right. We'll get that at the end, thank you.
Have you passed the ear around?
Pass the ear around?
Have you passed? I thought
Is that it? No. I don't know where it's gone.
I just thought it was going around, that's weird.
Oh.
I thought I heard someone say, is this the ear?
Could you pass me that blue knife, please? Yeah, thank you. I accidentally punctured it. I was trying to scoop it out, but I needed a spoon. I don't know if they'll want them back right now. We're probably going to clean them, but thank you. Oh, this is so blunt now. I just wanted to show how. But it's. Do we have more blades?
Yeah. Thank you. Good. That's what I like to hear.
What's that?
No, perfect.
What did you say?
Can't get my way. So do I.
Yeah, we'd love to do that, wouldn't we?
Yeah, we're trying. I would love to do a big whale dissection here.
Yes, we would need
we
a big
need a very
tent.
big tent. Thank you.
Thanks for
See
coming.
you later. You've been brilliant today. So you've enjoyed all this. I've been watching you and you've been really... Is it your birthday today? Oh no, you've got a badge, sorry. So I dissected a whale a few years ago up in North Norfolk that was a baby and it was 14 metres in length. So 14, the biggest strides you can do. It was just a baby and it had a weird defect in its spine. Again, lots of friends who are looking for different whale dissections and some get poisoned, some have plastic inside, some get caught and tangled up. But it's a really good way of looking at the environment by doing a dissection because it shows you what's going on in the habitats as well. Turtle, yeah. I did one in Madagascar, one in the Caribbean, and one of them was a huge loggerhead, massive loggerhead thing, like massive. It took about 15 people just to lift and do the dissection, but they're very hard to get inside. Yeah, and you can cut through the shell and then lift the whole thing off. It's tough, very, very tough. Yeah. Literally very tough.
Good idea.
So you think of becoming a vet or a pathologist or a scientist in some way, shape or form? A geologist? Amazing. Brilliant.
Could you just lift that up, please? Ben, could you lift that up, please?
If we get you some gloves, do you want to have a poke? Well, first of all, you should have realised that, sorry. Right, come on, then. What's your name, first of all? Zach. Hey, Aunt Catherine's got some gloves for you. Yeah. So if you want to go down the end where Catherine is and have a look at the legs, you can just see if you can move the limbs and see if they go together, see how they work. Because you were asking me earlier about the pads, weren't you? Was it you? Someone else. Okay. Oh, I remember that one. That was great. I've been asked much weirder, don't worry. And that one's the shoulder blade, and you can see that big thing in your left hand is the shoulder blade itself, the scapula, and that fits really nicely over the. Imagine we're thinking of Ellen here. You got her shoulder blade, sorry, Ellen, just sitting over the back of her chest here. It sort of slides against it, whereas the one in the pelvis, the ball and socket joint, is a completely different type of joint there. Now remember, you couldn't do that if you were alive because the ligaments and muscles wouldn't let you, but because you've got the bones, you can be much more flexible if there's just a skeleton there. So the big example of that is when people talk about saber-toothed cats, like Smilodon, and they open the mouth. They're like, oh, the mouth opens really wide. You're like, yeah, the bone does, but the muscles wouldn't have allowed that.
Those bells. Those bells.
That's great, isn't it?
Yeah.
What I might do is, so we can pack this, is take the head off.
Yeah, okay.
And then do the same down here somewhere. So we've just got, if you're happy to find where the head.
Scissors, yeah, scissors would be better.
I might do if it's easier. It's just